The first time I felt the weight of the world settle on my shoulders, it was because of a tiny hand gripping mine. Her fingers were small, delicate, and perfect, like they had been carved just for me. I looked down at her, the baby I had adopted in secret, and felt something stir deep in my chest, something fierce and unyielding. Love, pure and immediate, coursed through me, a force I hadn't expected and couldn't resist. But the world didn't see it that way. I remember the night it all began, the night I was cast out of the only home I had ever known. The sky outside my bedroom window was a bruised mix of violet and black, the wind tugging at the curtains as if it wanted to pull me into the darkness. Rain tapped against the glass like tiny drums, a rhythm that mirrored the pounding of my heart. I had been laughing moments before, cradling her in my arms, telling her a story I had made up about stars that danced across the sky. Then the door opened. His shadow stretched across the floor, long and sharp. My husband's eyes cold, hard, full of a fury I had never seen before fixed on me. "What have you done?" he demanded. His voice wasn't loud, but it was enough to make my blood run cold. It wasn't the words themselves. It was the accusation, the disappointment, the way the world seemed to narrow until there was nothing but his judgment. I adopted her, I whispered. The words sounded fragile even to my own ears. You what? His voice finally broke, sharp as a knife. Without telling me? Without asking me? I didn't ask permission because she needed me, I said, my voice trembling. She doesn't have anyone else. I couldn't wait. For a moment, the room was heavy with silence, broken only by the faint hiss of rain against the glass. Then came the slam of the door. My heart cracked with each echo. I stood frozen, the baby still nestled against my chest, feeling the rhythm of her heartbeat as if it were a lifeline, a tether to the world I still had left. I had nowhere to go. Every street outside was wet, empty, and unwelcoming. My phone lay on the floor, useless against the storm raging inside me. And then I heard a sound that didn't belong. It wasn't thunder. It wasn't the wind. It was something else. Something deliberate. A soft rustle from the trees just beyond the edge of my yard. I froze. The baby stirred and let out a small, tentative cry. I shushed her, trying to tell myself it was just my imagination. But it wasn't. There was a present something watching me from the shadows. Something that made the hair on the back of my neck rise and my pulse accelerate in ways I didn't understand. Remembered the dreams I had been having for weeks. Strange, vivid visions of a forest bathed in silver light, where the trees seemed to breathe and whisper. Sometimes I saw a man, tall and impossibly strong, with eyes that glowed like embers in the dark. He called to me, though I couldn't hear his voice. And each time I woke up, my chest ached as if I had lost something precious I hadn't yet met. Standing in my tiny, half-lit living room, I realized the dreams were more than dreams. Something was real. Something powerful was near, and I could feel it in the way the shadows moved, the way the air shifted, heavy with expectation. I hugged the baby closer, whispering promises I wasn't sure I could keep. It's okay. Mummy's here. I won't let anything hurt you. I had barely finished the words when I heard the knock. Not at the door. Not even on the walls. But somewhere in the room, gentle yet insistent, as though the darkness itself had reached out to touch me. My heart leapt into my throat. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs refused to obey. The knock came again, and this time I could swear it had a rhythm, like a heartbeat, not mine, not the baby's, but something else. Something alive. My eyes scanned the room, searching for the source. The shadows in the corners seemed to shift and sway, stretching into shapes I couldn't name. One shadow, taller than any other, seemed to linger near the doorway, as if waiting for permission to step forward. I felt drawn to it, even as fear tightened around my chest. My instincts told me to run, yet something deeper, something older than logic, told me to stay. The air felt electric, charged with a presence I couldn't yet define. And then I heard it, a voice, not a spoken voice, not words I could understand, but a resonance that seemed to hum through my bones. "You have chosen love," it said, though I could not hear it with my ears. "And for that you have been tested." I stumbled back, clutching the baby tighter. Her small eyes opened wide, reflecting the flickering candlelight. And for a moment, I felt like the world had paused. Then the shadow moved. Not like a human, not like any animal I had ever seen. It flowed forward, solidifying, coalescing into the figure from my dreams. The tall man, with eyes like smoldering coals, stood before me, strong, commanding, alpha. I wanted to speak, but my voice failed. The storm outside raged on, thrashing the world with wind and rain. Yet in that room, there was only him, only the pull of something ancient and powerful. The baby stirred again, sensing the shift in the air, and I realized that nothing would ever be the same. A chill ran down my spine. The night had begun as any other, yet it had brought me to the edge of something unimaginable. My ordinary life, the life I thought I knew, was over. And in the shadows, watching, waiting, the figure I had dreamed of, the alpha of a world I hadn't yet entered, was about to change everything. I didn't know if I was ready. I didn't know if I could survive. But deep inside, beneath the fear, beneath the uncertainty, I felt it the unmistakable pull of destiny, of power, and of a love that could shatter worlds. And then he spoke, finally, his voice a whisper of fire against the storm. "You have chosen her. Now, you must choose yourself." The storm had passed, but its aftermath left a tremor in the air I couldn't shake. I sat on the edge of the baby's crib, brushing a soft curl from her forehead, and tried to tell myself it had been nothing, just a coincidence, a trick of the wind, or the stress of the night before. But deep down, I knew better. Something had shifted. Something unseen had entered my life, and it wasn't going to leave quietly. Even in the light of day, the house felt wrong. The shadows lingered longer than they should, pooling in corners and stretching across walls like dark fingers. Sunlight fell through the curtains in patterns that didn't match the furniture, and the faintest whisper of movement brushed past me when no one else was there. I would swear I heard the softest breathing behind me, only to turn and find empty rooms staring back. At first, I tried to ignore it. I focused on the baby, naming her little triumphs, listening to her laugh and coos. That should have been enough to anchor me. But the unease clung, insistent, like fog that refuses to lift. It was subtle at first, shadows that seemed to move independently, a sensation of being watched, but it grew in intensity. I would catch glimpses out of the corner of my eye, a figure vanishing behind the doorway, a glint of eyes reflecting the morning light. My heart would jump each time, and a cold dread settled in my chest, heavier than the storm ever had. I started noticing the whispers. At first, I thought it was the baby's imagination, the gurgling coos she made in her sleep forming words in my mind that weren't there. But the whispers didn't fade when she woke. They came in the quietest moments, between breaths, between heartbeats. Voices that seemed to speak my name, or warn me of things I couldn't yet understand. The words were always just out of reach, like echoes of something ancient trying to reach me through the veil of ordinary life. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it, that stress and fear were making me see and hear things, that the encounters were getting harder to dismiss. Objects moved slightly from where I left them. Lights flickered with no explanation. And sometimes I would catch a scent smoky, earthy, familiar yet impossible to place. It was like someone had stepped into the room and vanished before I could confirm it. The neighbors seemed to sense it too, though I could never be sure. They avoided my eyes when I passed, their smiles polite but strained. Dogs in the area barked at nothing, stopping mid-growl as if someone or something had frozen them in place. Even the birds seemed to hush when I walked past, as though nature itself recognized the shift in the air. Then there were the dreams. They had returned, more vivid than ever, and I could no longer dismiss them as mere imagination. I would find myself standing in a forest bathed in silver light, the trees taller and more menacing than I remembered. Shadows clung to the trunks and slithered across the mossy ground like living creatures. And always, he was there, the tall figure with eyes that glowed like embers. Watching, waiting, speaking to me without words. I would wake in the middle of the night, my heart racing, the baby crying beside me, as if sensing my fear. Even my husband's absence was starting to feel like a weight pressing down on me. Not just the empty space in the house, but the realization that everyone I had trusted to guide me, to protect me, had turned away. And yet, through the fear, a part of me ached for something else, something I couldn't name. I wanted to see him again, the figure from my dreams, even if it meant stepping into the unknown. It wasn't just the house that felt fragile. Every part of my life seemed to teeter on the edge. Simple tasks, making breakfast, folding laundry, even walking to the mailbox felt perilous, as though invisible eyes followed my every move. The baby sensed it too. She would stiffen, her wide eyes fixed on corners of the room where nothing was, letting out a soft, warning whimper. When I looked around, there was nothing. But then there was always the faintest trace of movement, shadows shifting against the wall. The faint scent of smoke and earth, the echo of whispered syllables. I started keeping a journal, writing down every unusual occurrence in desperate hope that documenting it would make it real or unreal. I wasn't sure which. Every entry ended with the same conclusion. I was not alone. Something or someone was here, watching, waiting, and I couldn't help but feel it was only a matter of time before it revealed itself completely. The first day passed, then the second, and the unease only deepened. It was in the way the wind rattled the windows, in the way the floorboards groaned under invisible weight, in the way the baby would shiver for no reason and stare into corners I couldn't see. Every sensation was amplified, every shadow a potential threat. I was walking through life with one eye open, waiting for something I didn't understand but instinctively feared. That evening, I stepped outside to clear my mind. The moon hung low and swollen, casting pale silver light across the yard. Trees swayed, their branches scratching at the wind, and I felt the familiar pull of something watching from the darkness beyond. I froze, clutching the baby close, her warmth a fragile shield against the icy chill creeping up my spine. A movement caught my eye, a flicker among the trees. My pulse spiked, my breath shallow. I wanted to run, to retreat into the safety of my home, but my legs refused. Something drew me forward, an invisible thread connecting me to the shadows. I squinted, straining to see, and for a moment, I thought I glimpsed him, the figure from my dreams, taller than any human, his eyes glowing faintly, observing from the edge of the forest. Then he was gone. I staggered back inside, heart pounding, baby clutched to my chest. My hands trembled as I locked the doors and checked the windows. The whispers returned, softer now, almost soothing, as if mocking my fear. "You have been chosen," they seemed to say. "Prepare yourself." And for the first time, I realized the truth I had been avoiding. My ordinary life was gone. The quiet, predictable existence I had clung to was over. Something beyond comprehension had entered my world, Something powerful, something ancient, and it had marked me. As I laid the baby in her crib and sat by her side, I knew I wasn't ready. I didn't know what was coming, who or what was out there, or what it wanted from me. But the ripple of unease had grown into a tide, and I sensed that the moment of reckoning was approaching faster than I could imagine. And in that heavy silence, I felt it again, the pull of destiny, faint but undeniable, tugging at my soul, whispering that nothing would ever be the same. Something was coming, something inevitable, and I was helpless to stop it. I had convinced myself that the previous night had been a fluke, a storm, shadows, my imagination running wild. But as the days passed, it became clear that the world around me had shifted, and I was no longer the center of a normal, predictable life. It started with the animals. I had never thought much about the birds and squirrels that visited the yard, but now they seemed to watch me with purpose, their eyes unnervingly human, their movements almost deliberate. One morning, as I carried the baby outside, a black crow landed on the fence, tilting its head, regarding me in silence. Its beady eyes reflected a knowing intelligence that made my skin prickle. The crow cawed once, a sharp, discordant sound that seemed to echo longer than it should have, then took flight. A chill ran down my spine. It was the first of many signs that I was not alone in ways I could understand. Something or someone was trying to reach me. Later that day, while running errands, I noticed a strange piece of paper pinned to the community bulletin board outside the grocery store. I approached cautiously, my instincts prickling. The paper was blank, save for a single symbol scrawled in ink. A circle with intricate, intertwining lines inside it, almost like a knot, and a small triangle pointing downward at its base. I shivered. I didn't recognize the symbol, but it carried a weight. A silent warning I couldn't ignore. As I stared at it, an elderly woman shuffled past. Her head turned slightly as if she were looking for someone or something. Her voice was a rasping whisper, but I heard it clearly. "Be careful. The mark chooses, but it does not warn twice." I froze, gripping the baby closer. The woman didn't stop to explain or clarify. She shuffled away, disappearing into the crowd. But the words lodged in my mind, twisting fear and curiosity into something that refused to settle. The mark chooses? What mark? And what did she mean by warning twice? Back at home, I tried to shake it off, but the house no longer felt safe. I kept catching glimpses of movement in the corners of my eyes, shadows stretching and retreating, just beyond the reach of the light. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind against the windows, made my heart lurch. It was as if the house itself had become alive, conspiring to remind me that I had been noticed. Then came the first night of real terror. I was rocking the baby to sleep when I noticed the symbols. Not on paper this time, but carved faintly into the wooden floor near her crib. Tiny, intricate patterns that hadn't been there before. I ran my fingers over them, tracing the lines, but the deeper I looked, the more they seemed to shift, twisting under my touch. I felt a presence behind me, a pressure in the air, and I spun around. The room was empty. And yet I knew I was being observed. A sound at the window made me jump. A large owl, feathers glinting silver in the moonlight, perched just outside. Its gaze was unnervingly sharp, and it stayed fixed on me for what felt like an eternity. Then, as silently as it had appeared, it spread its wings and disappeared into the night. I hugged the baby to me, whispering promises I barely believed. The next morning I went to the town library to distract myself, to seek normalcy in the rows of books and dusty shelves. But even there, I couldn't escape the feeling of eyes on me. While scanning the reference section, I noticed a man in a dark coat, leaning against a shelf at the edge of the room. He didn't approach, didn't speak, but his presence was undeniable. I caught a glimpse of his eyes, Amber, glowing faintly as if lit from within, and my breath caught in my throat. Before I could gather my courage to confront him, he slipped out the door, leaving behind only a faint scent, earthy, smoky, powerful. My mind reeled. Who was he? Why did he watch me? And why did I feel that familiar pull, the same that I had felt in my dreams? Returning home, I found the symbols had multiplied. Now there were tiny carvings along the hallway, etched into door frames and even the base of the stairs. I ran my fingers over one, and a shiver ran through me, a signal I couldn't name. It was as if the carvings were alive, reacting to my touch, speaking a language I didn't yet understand. The whispers returned that night, louder and more insistent. They weren't just vague murmurs anymore. Words formed, phrases I could almost comprehend. Prepare. Chosen. Guardian. Danger. My chest tightened with fear and anticipation. I felt as though the world I had known ordinary, safe, predictable had ended, and I was now walking the edges of something larger, something ancient and relentless. Even the baby sensed it. She whimpered softly, reaching toward the shadows, her small fingers curling around nothing. I whispered to her, soothing her, but I felt the truth settling in my bones. We were being marked, watched, and prepared for something we could not yet name. That night, sleep came in fits. Every time my eyes closed, I saw the forest from my dreams, the silver light, the whispering trees, the figure waiting at the edge of the shadows. I woke again and again, the baby in my arms, my heart pounding, the feeling of being watched crawling beneath my skin by morning. I felt hollowed out, exhausted but also drawn, pulled forward by a thread I couldn't resist. Every shadow, every whisper, every symbol was a signal. Something was coming, and I was at the center of it. The ordinary world I had clung to was gone, and every heartbeat reminded me that my life was about to change. And yet, even as fear coiled tight around me, there was a spark of curiosity, a longing for what lay ahead. The whispers promised danger, yes, but also revelation. And deep down, I knew that the figure I had glimpsed, the alpha from my dreams, was no ordinary man. He was a key, and somehow, I was the lock. The day ended with the first true sense of unease, the kind that burrows deep into your soul and refuses to let go. I sat by the baby's crib, tracing her tiny fingers, my thoughts racing. Every symbol, every whisper, every strange encounter had a purpose I couldn't yet grasp. And I knew that it was all leading to something unavoidable. Something was coming, and I was running out of time to prepare. The house felt different that evening, charged with a tension I couldn't ignore. The shadows had deepened into shapes I could almost name, and the whispers soft, insistent, coaxing had returned with purpose. I wasn't imagining it anymore. Something was here, watching, waiting. I was carrying the baby to the window, hoping the evening sun might cast some ordinary glow into our little world, when I noticed it a flicker in the corner of my eye. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, but then I saw him, only for a moment, a shadow, taller than any human, moving along the tree line outside the yard. He didn't approach, didn't call out, but my chest tightened as if something inside me recognized him before my mind could process who he was. My fingers clenched around the window frame, knuckles white. The baby stirred, sensing the tension, and I whispered softly, rocking her in my arms. He vanished as quickly as he appeared, a mere shadow against the thickening dusk, yet his presence lingered in the air like a pulse, a magnetic hum that resonated through the floorboards beneath my feet. I could feel it in my bones, in the slow, persistent drum of my heartbeat. I told myself it was impossible. A neighbor? A passerby? that logic offered no comfort. His movement had been too deliberate, too controlled, and his aura, whatever it was, had brushed against me, leaving a warmth I couldn't name. The next few hours were unbearable. I paced the house, carrying the baby, trying to convince myself that what I saw was nothing more than a trick of the failing light. Yet, every creak of the floor, every rustle from the yard, seemed to echo with intention. Something or someone was testing me, probing me, watching my reactions with silent amusement, or perhaps caution. By nightfall, the whispers returned in earnest. They weren't voices I could understand fully, but the meaning was clear. He was near, and he was waiting for something from me. My chest tightened with a strange combination of fear and anticipation. I wasn't just being watched. I was being drawn, and the pull was irresistible. Unable to remain inside any longer, I stepped out onto the porch. The night air was cool, damp with the faint scent of rain that had passed hours before. Trees swayed gently, and the shadows stretched long across the yard, curling and folding in ways that made my skin prickle. I held the baby close, whispering reassurances, though my own voice trembled. Then I saw him again, a fleeting silhouette beyond the trees, just at the edge of visibility, and for a brief instant, our eyes were what I imagined where his eyes met. It was impossible to describe the sensation. Magnetic, unnerving, as if some invisible tether had linked my heartbeat to his, a pull that refused to be denied. My chest ached, my mind buzzed, and a shiver traveled down my spine. He didn't move closer, and yet I felt him nearer than ever. The air seemed to pulse around me, charged with his presence. I wanted to speak, to call out, but no words came. My body had frozen in equal parts fear and fascination. Even the baby seemed to sense it. Her small fingers tightened around mine, her eyes wide and fixed in the same direction. I had been staring. And then he was gone. The night returned to its ordinary sounds, rustling leaves, distant cars, the faint hum of life beyond the trees, but I knew it wasn't ordinary anymore. The encounter had left an impression on me I could neither understand nor ignore. Something about him, whoever he was, had brushed against the edges of my soul, stirring a longing I didn't even know existed. I went inside, locking the doors and windows, yet the sensation remained. Every shadow seemed alive, every whisper hovering just beyond the reach of understanding. I moved through the house as though I were treading water, the baby's warmth my only anchor to reality. Yet even in the safety of the walls, the pull of the night, the pull of him, lingered. Sleep came reluctantly, haunted by fragments of movement, of glowing eyes in the distance, of a shadow that was both terrifying and mesmerizing. In my dreams, he appeared again, not fully, only glimpses. A hand reaching through the silvered mist of the forest, a tall figure stepping silently across moonlit ground, eyes that glimmered with fire, and a presence that pressed against the walls of my mind with gentle insistence. I woke in the early hours. The baby curled against me, sensing my unease. I whispered to her, trying to ground myself. The house was quiet, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Something had entered my life, and it had made itself impossible to ignore. By morning, the pull hadn't faded. If anything, it had grown stronger. Every shadow, every flicker of movement outside the window seemed to pulse with intention. And I knew, with a certainty that was both thrilling and terrifying, that he would appear again. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know what he wanted. But I knew one thing. I would recognize him again. And when I did, nothing in my life would ever be the same. The unease had grown into a quiet obsession. I found myself scanning every corner of the yard, every shadow in the house, for even the faintest sign of him. Each flicker of light, Each whisper of movement made my pulse race. The baby sensed it too, her small body stiffening as though she understood more than I did. And then I realized something that both terrified and exhilarated me. I wanted to see him again, even if it meant stepping into the unknown. The first glimpse had been brief, too fleeting, but the impression it left was permanent. His presence, shadowy, magnetic, unnerving, had carved itself into my thoughts. A silent promise of something dangerous, something forbidden, something I could not yet comprehend. As I sat by the window that morning, staring out at the trees where he had appeared, I felt a pull in my chest I couldn't ignore. Curiosity, fear, fascination all tangled together, weaving a thread I knew I would follow. And somewhere deep inside, I sensed that the moment he revealed himself fully, my life would change forever. For now, all I had was a glimpse, a shadow, and a feeling that I was already marked. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The pull that had been whispering at the edges of my mind, tugging me toward the shadows, had grown impossible to resist. Every creak of the floor, every flicker of movement outside the window, every whisper in the dark seemed to insist I step closer to him. And tonight I would. The forest behind our home stretched dark and silent under the pale moonlight. Mist curled among the trees like fingers reaching out, soft and unsettling. I wrapped the baby securely in my arms, a fragile shield of warmth, and stepped onto the narrow path that led to the edge of the woods. The air was cool and damp, carrying the scent of earth, rain, and something far older, something alive. I didn't know what I expected, fear, perhaps, or relief, but the instant I crossed into the shadows I felt his presence. Not behind me, not beside me, but around me, as if the darkness itself were alive and pulsing with him. My heartbeat surged, rapid and uneven, but it wasn't just fear. Something else coursed through me, a magnetic, undeniable pull that made every nerve tingle. And then I saw him. He stepped from the shadows as if he had always been there. Every movement smooth, deliberate, commanding, taller than any man I had ever seen. His silhouette powerful and perfect. And yet something in the way he moved was otherworldly. Eyes like molten amber caught the moonlight, piercing, intense, and when they landed on me, the air seemed to hum with a force I couldn't name. "You came," he said, his voice low, rough around the edges, yet layered with a strange warmth that made my chest tighten. I had to," I stammered, clutching the baby closer. I felt, I don't know, something pulling me here. His gaze didn't waver. "That is no coincidence," he said. A faint smile brushed his lips, almost predatory in its subtlety. "You have been chosen, whether you understand it or not." I wanted to step back, but my feet felt rooted to the ground. My pulse raced, a dangerous rhythm that matched the tension in the air. His presence was intoxicating, dangerous, irresistible. Every instinct screamed at me to be wary, yet every part of me wanted to move closer, to see, to touch, to understand. "You're different," I managed to whisper. "I don't even know who you are." He tilted his head slightly, studying me as if peeling back layers of my soul. "I am what you have dreamed of," he said, cryptically. "And yet, more than you could have imagined." The baby stirred, and he glanced down, his eyes softening ever so slightly. "She feels it too," he murmured almost to himself. "The connection, stronger than blood, older than time. I felt it too, the pull, the current that ran between us. I didn't understand it, couldn't name it, but it vibrated through my chest, my hands, my very bones. Every step he took closer made my heart thrum like a drum, a mixture of fear, awe, and something I wasn't supposed to feel. "Why are you here?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What do you want from us?" "To protect," he said simply. "And to guide." But there was something else in his voice, something deeper and unspoken. Desire? Command? Warning? My chest constricted at the realization that I was not just drawn to him, I was pulled, magnetically, in a way I had never experienced. It was dangerous, forbidden, and yet it made my stomach twist with something dangerously close to longing. He stepped closer, and the shadows seemed to bend toward him. I could see the fine details now, the sharp lines of his jaw, the intensity of his eyes, the subtle tension in his shoulders. Power radiated from him in waves, undeniable and almost overwhelming. Every instinct screamed caution, yet every part of me ached to reach out, to feel, to know. "You are afraid," he said softly, as if reading my thoughts. "And yet you come willingly. That is rare." I don't know why," I admitted. My voice was barely more than a whisper, but I felt the truth in it. "There's something about you, something I can't resist." He smiled faintly, and it was as dangerous as it was alluring. "Good," he said, "because resisting will not be an option." The baby yawned, stretching tiny arms, and I realized she had been quiet for the entire encounter. His gaze softened further, lingering on her with something almost paternal. And yet, when he looked back at me, the intensity returned. Hotter, sharper, almost unbearable. I wanted to step back, but I couldn't. I wanted to run, but my feet refused. I wanted to scream, to deny the magnetic pull tugging at my soul, but it was impossible. The force between us was undeniable, unrelenting, a silent command I was powerless to resist. Minutes or hours, it was impossible to tell passed in a tense silence. Each of us studying the other, feeling the undercurrent of something forbidden, dangerous, yet impossibly enticing. His presence was overwhelming, yet protective, terrifying, yet exhilarating. Finally, he spoke again, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through my very core. "You do not yet understand the path you are on," he said. "But you will. And when you do, you will have no choice but to embrace it." I shivered, not from cold, but from the truth in his words. The pull was real. The connection was undeniable. And somewhere deep down, a part of me longed to see where it would lead, even if it was forbidden, even if it was dangerous. And then, as silently as he had appeared, he stepped back into the shadows. The moonlight dimmed his outline, leaving only the faintest trace of his presence in the air. My legs trembled beneath me. My chest ached. My mind raced with questions I couldn't yet answer. The baby slept peacefully, unaware of the electricity that had filled the night. I stood frozen, clutching her to my chest, my heart hammering in my ears. The encounter had been brief, fleeting, yet the mark it left on me was permanent. I could feel it in my bones, in my pulse, in the air that still seemed charged around me. I was drawn in, deeply, dangerously, and I had no idea how far the pull would take me. As I made my way back home, the shadows seemed to cling closer, the whispers softer now, like a promise or a warning I could not yet comprehend. I was shaken, unsettled, and yet curiously, impossibly excited that he was out there, watching, waiting, and somehow, I already knew that meeting him was only the beginning. Something inside me had been awakened that night, a force I could not name, a longing I could not deny. And for the first time, I understood that my life had changed forever. I was no longer just a mother trying to protect her child. I was a woman caught in the pull of something ancient, powerful, and irresistible. and I was terrified. But I wanted more. The next few days blurred together. A strange haze of normalcy and impossible coincidences that left me questioning my own mind. Every mundane task, the grocery run, folding laundry, rocking the baby to sleep, suddenly felt fragile, as if the ordinary world I clung to was cracking at the edges. It began with small things. Shadows that lingered too long, rustling sounds in empty rooms, and lights flickering when no storm passed. I found tiny claw marks on the wooden floor, faint and almost delicate, near the baby's crib. I had checked it a dozen times before. They weren't there. My pulse raced. But the marks weren't aggressive. They seemed deliberate, like warnings or signals left for me to see. Then there were the dreams. Every night the forest returned. The silver light, the whispering trees, the figure of him, the alpha I could no longer stop thinking about, stepped closer each time. Sometimes he didn't speak, only watched me as I wandered the moonlit paths. The air around him charged with power I couldn't touch but could feel in every fiber of my being. Other nights, I heard voices soft, urgent, warning me, guiding me, urging me to prepare. It wasn't just dreams anymore. Small, impossible coincidences started bleeding into my waking life. A black crow perched outside my window the moment I opened my eyes. Its eyes seemed too intelligent, too knowing, and it didn't fly away, even when I approached. A wolf's howl echoed in the distance, long and mournful, though there were no wolves in the area. Even the wind felt deliberate, brushing against my skin with intention, guiding me in ways I didn't understand. One afternoon, I went into town to run errands. At the local cafe, the elderly woman from before, the one who whispered warnings, was sitting alone. She caught my gaze and tilted her head slightly, her eyes sharp and knowing. "You are in the path now," she said, her voice low and trembling with age and authority. "The path chooses the willing and the unwilling. It devours." I froze, a shiver running down my spine. "I don't understand," I whispered. "You will," she replied. "Soon enough." Then, as abruptly as she had spoken, she stood, leaving only a faint scent of earth and smoke behind her. I watched her shuffle out of the cafe, my mind spinning. She wasn't ordinary, that much I knew, and neither was he. The days wore on, each one a delicate dance between the mundane and the impossible. I tried to maintain a sense of normalcy for the baby, feeding her, bathing her, singing her lullabies, but it became increasingly difficult. The pull from him, from the shadows, from something I couldn't name, grew stronger with every heartbeat. One evening, the first real danger struck. I was walking home through the quiet streets, the baby in her carrier, when I noticed movement in the alleyway beside my house. At first, I thought it was a stray cat or a trick of the streetlights, but then the shadow twisted unnaturally, stretching and contracting as if alive. My stomach dropped and I quickened my pace, clutching the baby tighter. A figure emerged, a man, but not him. Taller, broader, with eyes dark and hollow, and a presence that made the hair on my arms stand on end. I froze, unable to move as he stepped closer, his intentions clear in the way the shadows clung to him. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice low and threatening. I live here," I stammered, panic rising. The baby whimpered in response to my fear, her small voice cutting through the tension. The figure tilted his head, watching her with something I didn't recognize. And then, just as suddenly as he appeared, he vanished into the darkness. My heart pounded in my chest, and I realized there were forces here that weren't just observing. They were testing me. That night, sleep was impossible. I lay awake, the baby tucked against my chest, feeling the shadows move along the walls of the room. Every creak of the floor, every whisper of the wind felt like a warning, a prelude to something larger. My dreams were violent with light and shadow, the forest ablaze with silver fire. And always him watching, waiting, guiding me. By the next morning, I was exhausted, hollowed out by fear and anticipation. The boundaries between ordinary life and the supernatural had blurred completely. I could no longer pretend that my world was normal. The collision was inevitable. It came to a head that afternoon. I was in the backyard, letting the baby crawl on a blanket in the sun, when I noticed the symbols again etched faintly into the bark of the trees. Perfectly formed, glowing faintly in a way that made my stomach twist. I had seen these symbols in my dreams, in the carvings at home, and now they were here, alive in the world around me. A low growl reached my ears, soft at first, then growing in volume and intensity. My heart leapt into my throat. The shadows in the yard thickened, curling around the edges like living tendrils. And I saw movement, a pair of glowing amber eyes reflected in the shaded corner near the trees. And then I heard his voice. "Stay back," he commanded, but there was no anger in it. Only caution, power, and an intensity that made my skin prickle. I froze, clutching the baby closer. The growl intensified, coming from the shadows beyond him. My mind raced. Danger was real, immediate, and yet, the pull, the connection was irresistible. Even with fear thrumming in my veins, I wanted him closer, wanted to understand, wanted to step into the impossible. A figure stepped from the shadows, a wolf-like creature, massive, predatory, but intelligent in its gaze. It snarled low, circling, testing, challenging. I felt the danger acutely. My heart hammered in my chest as instincts screamed at me to protect the baby, to run, to do anything, but I couldn't move. I was rooted, half by fear, half by the magnetic presence of him. He stepped forward, and the creature froze. His voice, low and commanding, carried across the yard. "Back, now." The wolf hesitated, growled one last time, then slunk into the shadows, leaving only the rustle of leaves in its wake. I sank to my knees, clutching the baby, my body trembling. My pulse raced, my chest ached, and yet, even in the terror, I couldn't deny the draw, the pull, the dangerous fascination that clung to him. He was not just my protector. He was my magnet, my challenge, and perhaps the first glimpse of something I wasn't ready to name. As he stepped closer, the shadows around him seemed to bend, responding to his presence. The pull between us was undeniable, an invisible tether coiling around my chest. I wanted to step back, but I couldn't, even with danger so close, even with the world shifting around me in ways I didn't understand. I wanted him. And I knew, with a certainty that terrified me, that the collision of our worlds had only just begun. Because in the shadows, in the symbols, in the creatures of the night, something was stirring, a force far older, far stronger than I had imagined, and it was coming for us. The days after the encounter with the creature in the yard blurred into a strange rhythm. Fear and fascination intertwined, leaving me constantly on edge, yet strangely alive. I could no longer deny that he had become a force in my life, magnetic, dangerous and impossible to ignore. He appeared first as a shadow, a movement at the edge of my vision, always keeping his distance, observing me. But then, slowly, cautiously, he began to step closer. His presence was no longer a fleeting glimpse. It was intentional. And I realized, with a mixture of fear and anticipation, that he wanted me to see him, truly see him. One evening, after the baby had fallen asleep, I found him waiting at the edge of the forest. The moonlight spilled over the yard, casting silver across the grass. And there he stood, tall, commanding, and impossibly beautiful. His eyes glimmered like molten amber, and for the first time, he allowed himself to speak without the barrier of shadows between us. "You survived the night," he said, voice low but warm. I was concerned. I started, but the words faltered. I didn't know what to expect. My pulse raced. "I still don't." He smiled faintly, a subtle curve of lips that made my heart skip. Most wouldn't. Most would have run or hidden, but you face it. His gaze didn't waver, steady and unyielding. Yet there was an undercurrent of something softer, something intimate that made the air between us electric. "Why me?" I asked, the question barely audible. "Why now? Why? Any of this?" He stepped a little closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him, yet not so close as to overstep some unspoken boundary. "Because you were chosen," he said, "but also because you are ready, whether you know it or not." I shivered at the weight in his words, the authority in his presence. And yet there was a strange gentleness, a deliberate care in the way he observed me. He had stepped into my world, and somehow I had let him. Over the next days, our encounters became frequent. Not all of them were in the shadows. Sometimes he would appear at a distance, watching over the baby as she played, ensuring she was safe, always invisible to the world but palpable to me. He began to speak in ways that felt natural, guiding me, sharing fragments of his world. "You cannot fear it," he said one evening, sitting at the edge of the yard, just out of reach. "This world, mine, yours, the spaces in between, they are not simple, but they are part of you now, part of all of us. What are you?" I asked, daring to meet his eyes fully for the first time. "I mean, really, not just what I see, but more than what you imagine," he interrupted softly, his voice like velvet and steel intertwined. "I have lived through centuries of rules, of battles, of survival. What you see is only a fragment." I wanted to step closer, to bridge the space between us, but instinct and caution restrained me. And yet, the magnetic pull between us was undeniable, pulling at my chest, my pulse, my very soul. Every word he spoke, every glance he allowed me to meet, made me ache in ways I didn't understand. We began to share small secrets. I told him about the baby, my fears, my sense of loss and rejection from the world I once knew. And in return, he shared glimpses of his past, not the full story. Not yet, but enough to hint at pain, responsibility, and an existence far beyond ordinary life. "You trust easily," he said once, watching me frown as I tried to grasp some invisible truth. "But you are cautious with your heart. That will serve you well. And yet, it will not protect you from me." I laughed softly, a nervous sound, and felt the pull of his presence even stronger. "You sound like a warning," I said, heart pounding. "Perhaps," he admitted, "but perhaps also a promise." The attraction between us was subtle at first gestures, lingering looks, the brush of a hand as he helped steady me over uneven ground. But each small connection carried a current too potent to ignore. My body recognized his presence in ways my mind struggled to understand. Forbiddance, yes, but impossible to resist. One night the pull became overwhelming. I had followed him into the forest, unable to stay in the house any longer, drawn by a force I could not name. The mist hung low between the trees, curling around our feet, and for the first time, I saw him fully, not as a shadow, not as a flicker at the edge of my vision, but in the light of the moon. His features were sharper than I had imagined, the angles of his face chiseled, the strength in his shoulders undeniable. And then I saw it, the hint of his true self. His eyes glowed brighter, not just amber but molten gold, reflecting an ancient power that made my breath catch. His pupils elongated slightly, and the faintest outline of fangs glimmered as he smiled, not threateningly, but as though revealing a piece of a puzzle I hadn't yet known existed. I staggered back, clutching the baby instinctively, though she was asleep and unaware. What are you?" I whispered, my voice trembling. He stepped closer, the shadows bending with him, his presence overwhelming and magnetic. "What I am is what you feared and desired all at once," he said softly. "I am both protector and predator, guide and force. And yet, all I want is to keep you safe." My heart raced uncontrollably. The attraction, the fear, the fascination all collided inside me, leaving me dizzy, vulnerable, and more drawn to him than ever. I could see now that the danger and the desire were intertwined. To know him was to risk everything, and yet the thought of stepping away felt impossible. "I don't understand it," I admitted, my voice barely audible. "Why I feel this, why you?" He shook his head, almost sadly. "You don't need to understand yet, only to feel, and you do." A silence fell between us, heavy with unspoken truths. I felt the pull of his presence like a tide, drawing me closer, bending my instincts and my heart in ways I had never imagined. And then, just as quickly as he had revealed a fragment of his true self, he stepped back into the shadows, leaving me trembling, clutching the baby, my mind racing with questions, fear, and a forbidden longing that refused to be denied. I was shaken, deeply, terrified and exhilarated all at once. And yet, one truth had become undeniable. The bond between us had grown, silent and magnetic, weaving threads that could not be broken. And the glimpse of his true self, the ancient, powerful, dangerous being he was, had left me breathless, aware that our connection was far more profound, far more perilous, and far more forbidden than I had ever imagined. The days that followed the night, I glimpsed his true form, were a blur of emotions I couldn't name. Fear, fascination, longing, and an undeniable pull that made my chest ache intertwined in a knot I could not unravel. Every moment without him felt hollow, yet every moment with him carried a tension I could barely bear. He no longer lingered in the shadows alone. Sometimes I would see him at a distance, standing perfectly still at the edge of the yard, watching me, his amber eyes gleaming like molten gold in the moonlight. The pull between us was stronger than ever, magnetic and unrelenting. Yet I could feel cracks forming in the invisible thread that bound us. It began with small, almost imperceptible signs. One evening, while the baby slept, I heard him in the yard, speaking softly to something unseen. His words were melodic but strange, in a language I could not understand, and the shadows around him seemed to curl and sway, responding as though they had a life of their own. My breath caught, and I pressed myself against the wall, unsure whether to step closer or run. Then came the scratches. Not on the floor, not on the doors, this time on me. A faint, invisible pressure, a sensation like claws brushing my skin in a warning, or perhaps a testing of boundaries. I flinched, startled, and when I turned, he was there, just beyond the reach of the porch light, looking at me with those piercing eyes. "You feel it?" he said softly, almost amused, though the warmth in his tone was laced with something darker. I don't understand," I whispered, my pulse racing. "What is happening?" "Everything is happening because of who I am," he replied, the shadows bending around him as he stepped closer. "And who you are becoming." There was a hint of something dangerous in his voice, something primal and irresistible. My chest tightened, torn between curiosity and dread. Every instinct screamed that he was not safe, that the pull I felt was both a gift and a warning. And then he showed me another fragment of himself. It was a simple gesture, almost casual. He raised a hand, and the shadows at the edges of the yard twisted and flowed as if alive, coiling around the trunks of the trees. A faint glow emanated from the mist, illuminating him in a spectral light. His skin shimmered, almost silver in the moonlight, and his eyes flared briefly, a burst of raw power that made the hair on my arms rise. I stumbled backward, clutching the baby. What are you?" I gasped, fear and fascination warring within me. He lowered his hand, the shadows retreating, and stepped closer again, his expression unreadable. "I told you. Only a fragment," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "You are not ready for the truth." "Not yet." I wanted to argue, to demand the answers that burned behind my eyes, but the tension in his presence held me silent. I could feel the danger coiled within him, the depth of power that I had glimpsed. And a part of me wanted to run, but another part wanted to surrender, to step closer and understand everything. Yet, with every revelation, a shadow of doubt crept in. If he was capable of such power, then why did he remain hidden in the shadows for so long? What had he not told me? What could he do that I didn't yet see? My mind raced with questions, each one prickling my skin with unease. The baby stirred, sensing my tension. I whispered to her, trying to calm both of us. But my thoughts remained tangled in fear and fascination. He knelt briefly, studying her with an intensity that made me flinch. And then his gaze returned to mine. "You are tied to her," he said softly, almost as if reading my mind. "And through her, to me. That is why you are here. That is why you cannot ignore what is coming." I swallowed hard. Can I trust you?" I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. He paused, his expression flickering. For a moment the warmth in his eyes softened, and I thought I saw something human there, a vulnerability that mirrored my own. "Trust," he said slowly, "is a luxury in my world, and yet you have it, whether you realize it or not." His words should have reassured me, but instead they left a cold shadow across my heart. The power I glimpsed, the fragments of his true nature, hinted at danger I could barely comprehend. How could I trust someone who existed in shadows I could not enter? Someone whose life spanned centuries, whose strength dwarfed mine, and whose motives remained partially hidden. The tension between us grew with every encounter. His presence was both a shield and a threat, a constant push and pull that left me dizzy. I wanted to lean into it, to surrender to the connection, but the shadows whispered warnings I could not ignore. There were cracks in the bond now, subtle and fragile, yet undeniable. I found myself wandering the yard at night, tracing the faint carvings and symbols that had appeared on the trees. Each one pulsed with a strange energy, a reminder of the force I had invited into my life. And with each symbol I felt the tug of him closer, an invisible thread weaving between us. Fragile and taut. Then came a sound that made my blood run cold. A low growl, soft at first, then rising in intensity from the far edge of the forest. The baby stirred in my arms, and I froze, heart hammering. He appeared instantly, stepping between us and the source of the growl. His eyes flared, and the shadows around him shifted, forming a protective barrier that made the air itself seem alive. "You are not safe," he said, voice low, dangerous and urgent. "And yet, you are still here." I nodded, swallowing my fear, but the mistrust lingered. His power was undeniable, his presence intoxicating, yet the fragments I had glimpsed hinted at secrets I couldn't yet name. How much of him was guardian, and how much was something else entirely? How could I surrender to the pull between us when shadows and danger clung to him as tightly as they clung to me? He stepped back, the shadows retreating with him, leaving me trembling, the baby in my arms and a storm of uncertainty swirling in my chest. I wanted to call after him, to demand answers, to bridge the gap between fear and fascination. But my voice caught, silent against the weight of what I had seen. For the first time, I understood that the bond between us, magnetic and undeniable as it was, could not erase doubt. The fragments of his true self, the power, the danger, the ancient presence cast long shadows over my trust. I was drawn to him, helplessly and irresistibly, yet a part of me feared the world he inhabited. And in that fear, I realized a truth I could not deny. The connection between us was far from simple. It was beautiful and terrifying, irresistible and forbidden. And it was only just beginning. The night settled over the yard, cool and heavy with mist. I held the baby closer, tracing her tiny fingers, and stared at the edge of the forest where he had disappeared. The pull between us remained, silent and insistent. A thread I could not break, but now it was shadowed with mistrust. And I knew that the deeper I allowed myself to go, the more I would risk losing not just my heart, but everything I had ever known. The collision of worlds had begun, and I was caught in the middle, torn between fear and fascination, trust and doubt, desire and danger, and yet I could not look away. I tried to push it away. I really did. Every fiber of my being screamed that this him was dangerous, forbidden, something I should resist. But the pull was relentless, threading through my thoughts, tugging at my heart, and curling around every beat of my pulse. The nights were the hardest. Sleep became a blurred boundary between reality and dreams. In the darkness, the forest returned, silver mist curling around my feet, and there he was taller, stronger, his eyes glowing amber with that impossible power. Sometimes he reached for me, his hands almost tangible in the dream, yet I could never touch him. Other times he watched from a distance, calm, patient, a predator restrained only by invisible rules I couldn't comprehend. I would wake, heart racing, hands trembling, the baby safe beside me, and the world felt painfully ordinary. And yet, the ordinary was unbearable. The memory of him, the pull, the intensity, the forbidden fascination lingered like a weight pressing down on my chest. I found myself pacing the house, murmuring to the baby, whispering words I barely understood, as if speaking them aloud might untangle the tangle of desire and fear inside me. During the day, I tried to focus on the mundane, but the pull was ever present. Shadows seemed to flicker with his presence. The wind seemed to carry his voice, and every subtle movement in the house made me think he had returned. I would step toward the edge of the yard, feeling the magnetic draw in my chest, then jerk back, reminding myself of the danger, the mystery, the uncertainty that surrounded him, but resistance only made the pull stronger. I found myself walking in the forest one evening, the baby asleep in her carrier. The mist curled thick around the trees, silver light spilling across the underbrush, and I felt it, the unmistakable tug of him. My legs moved on their own, as if the forest itself guided me toward him, despite my mind screaming to turn back. And then he was there. He stepped from the mist, silent, powerful, and my heart faltered at the sight of him. The amber of his eyes glowed softly, but the intensity in his gaze left me breathless. He studied me, and I felt as though he could see every thought, every doubt, every desire twisting in my chest. "You should not be here alone," he said, his voice low and calm, yet carrying an authority that made my body respond before my mind could think. I I can't stay away, I admitted, voice barely above a whisper. No matter how hard I try. A faint smile tugged at his lips. Almost gentle, almost tender. I wondered how long it would take before you admitted it, he murmured. The pull is not yours alone. It has always been mine as well. My chest tightened at his words, the combination of danger and desire coiling in my stomach. Why? I asked, shaking my head. Why me? Why now? Because you are bound to what is coming, he said softly. Bound to her and through her, to me. The connection exists whether you fight it or not. I swallowed hard, fear and longing colliding in my chest. I wanted to step back, to flee, to resist the temptation that twisted through my veins. And yet, I couldn't. The pull was magnetic, irresistible. It wrapped around me like a second skin, whispering promises I wasn't supposed to hear. You do not understand, I whispered. I could be in danger. The baby. I can't risk her. His gaze softened slightly, and he stepped closer, the shadows bending around him. You will never face this alone, he said. But you must decide, will you deny what you feel, or accept it? The words were a challenge and a promise, and I felt the tension in my chest deepen. Desire, forbidden and dangerous, surged through me like wildfire. Every instinct screamed at me to run, yet every heartbeat urged me to move closer. I was caught in a storm of emotions I could not untangle. Love, fear, fascination, and temptation. That night, I dreamed again. The forest stretched endless beneath a silver moon, mist curling at my feet. He appeared, silent, and I felt the pull stronger than ever. In the dream, I walked toward him, drawn as if by gravity, though a part of me wanted to stop. The pull became unbearable, a force I could not resist, and every step brought me closer to something I knew I shouldn't want. He reached for me, his hand hovering inches from mine, and the connection between us crackled like lightning through my veins. I wanted to run my fingers along his, to touch, to feel, to surrender, but fear gripped me. I knew that crossing this boundary could change everything, could alter the fragile world I had built for the baby and me. And yet, I wanted it. When I awoke, my body trembled and the baby stirred in her crib. The memory of the dream clung to me like a second skin, impossible to ignore. The pull was no longer just in my mind, it was in my body, my instincts, the very air around me. Every shadow in the room seemed to hum with the memory of him. I knew I could not fight it much longer. The next evening, I found myself at the edge of the forest again. The pull almost unbearable. My steps carried me forward, despite the fear curling in my stomach. And then he appeared, stepping from the mist with that impossible grace, eyes glowing with the molten intensity that had haunted my dreams. You've come, he said softly, almost amused. Despite everything you fear. I faltered, my heart hammering. I can't stop. He stepped closer, closer than ever, and I felt the pull of him like a current running through my very soul. The shadows curled around us, protective and alive, and I realized that the line between danger and desire had vanished. I wanted him. I needed him. And I knew in that moment that resisting was no longer an option. I shouldn't. I whispered, my voice breaking, but I can't. He smiled faintly, a dangerous, magnetic curve of lips that made my chest ache. Then don't, he said, and I felt the pull tighten, binding me to him in ways I could neither resist nor fully understand. And there, under the silver light of the moon, surrounded by shadows and the whispers of the forest, I realized I was facing a temptation I could not ignore. A desire forbidden, dangerous, and impossible but utterly irresistible. The pull between us had become unbearable, magnetic and relentless. Yet I could no longer ignore the shadows that lurked beyond the edges of our fragile world. Danger had begun to seep into my life. Subtle at first, an unexplained growl in the night, a shadow that moved independently of any source, symbols etched deeper into the trees around our home. But now it was escalating. I first noticed it in town. The whispers returned, this time louder, more pointed. People I had never seen before watched from the corners of streets and alleyways, their eyes sharp and calculating. One man, tall and dark-haired, had lingered in the market for days, watching me as though I were prey. When our eyes met, a flicker of recognition passed over his face, and then he vanished into the crowd. My pulse hammered as I realized I was being followed. At home, the air seemed heavier, charged with a tension I could not name. The shadows no longer simply lingered, they moved. They twisted toward the house in unnatural patterns, curling around the porch and slipping beneath the doors as if testing our defenses. The baby sensed it too, waking more frequently, her tiny body stiff with unease even in sleep. He appeared that night, as always, emerging from the mist at the edge of the forest. The pull of him was immediate, suffocating, and yet comforting. He stepped forward, powerful and graceful, and I felt my breath catch in my chest. "Something is coming," he said, his voice low, threaded with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "Forces I have not faced in centuries are stirring. And you are caught in the middle." "Why me?" I asked, clutching the baby tighter. "Why now?" "Because of what you carry," he replied, eyes fixed on the shadows beyond. "Because of her." He nodded toward the baby. "And because of what I am." The words were a warning and a confession, and I felt the weight of them press against my chest. My mind raced. I had known danger lurked, but I had not understood the scope. Now it was clear. His past was bleeding into the present, and I and the baby were caught in its path. The first real encounter came the following evening. A low growl echoed from the forest, this one deeper, more vicious than any I had heard before. I froze, the baby clutching my chest, and from the shadows emerged a creature, a wolf, larger than any natural animal, its eyes burning red and teeth bared. It paused at the edge of the yard, staring directly at me, and I felt a primal terror surge through my body. He appeared instantly, stepping between us with a power that radiated like a living force. The shadows swirled around him, forming a protective barrier, and the wolf hissed, snarled, and backed away, unwilling to cross the invisible line. "You cannot face this alone," he said, voice low and commanding. "And yet, you have already faced more than you realize." I nodded, trembling, feeling both the thrill and the fear. The pull between us was still there, magnetic and consuming, but the reality of the threat was undeniable. I could no longer pretend that his world and mine could coexist peacefully. Over the next few days, the signs multiplied. Symbols appeared etched into our doors, windows, and even the baby's toys. Shadows moved in unnatural patterns, whispering my name when no one was near. And always, lurking behind the danger, was him watching, protecting, drawing me closer while revealing just enough of his power to remind me how perilous it was to be near him. Then came the message. An unexpected visitor at the edge of the forest. A figure cloaked in darkness, leaving behind a single ominous note. Written in sharp, deliberate strokes was a warning. "She is yours for now, but all debts are paid in shadows." My hands shook as I read it, realizing that the forces converging around us were not only powerful, they were personal. They knew of him, of me, of the bomb that was forming, and they were testing it. I turned to him instinctively, and he was there, silent and commanding, watching my reaction. "They know," he said simply, his amber eyes flaring briefly. And they will come. Who? I asked, fear threading through my voice. Enemies from my past, he replied, the shadows around him tightening as if echoing his words. Those who once challenged me, who were denied, and who will not forgive easily. They see you as a weakness, my weakness, and they will exploit it. The revelation sent a shiver down my spine. I had known he was powerful, ancient, dangerous, but now the scale of the threat became tangible. We were not just dealing with curiosity or subtle warnings. The forces from his past were real, and they were coming for us. The night deepened, shadows stretching across the yard as the wind picked up. The baby slept unaware, but I felt every nerve in my body alert. Every instinct screamed that this was only the beginning, that the calm before had been an illusion. I don't know if I can do this, I admitted, voice barely a whisper, trembling as I clutched the baby. And just, ordinary. I don't belong in this. You do belong, he said firmly, stepping closer. His presence was overwhelming, magnetic yet protective. You may not understand it now, but you are part of something much larger. The bond between you, the baby, and me. It is ancient and it is powerful. And it will be tested. I shivered, torn between awe and fear. The pull between us remained, irresistible and consuming. Yet the shadow of danger was now undeniable. I realized the stakes were far higher than I had imagined. It was no longer just about curiosity, desire, or forbidden attraction. Survival and the survival of the baby hung in the balance. A rustle in the forest made me jump. He stepped forward, protective, his amber eyes scanning the shadows. The wind carried a faint growl, low and threatening. I felt the pull tighten, a tether between us, binding me to him even as fear threatened to overwhelm me. This is only the beginning, he said, voice low, filled with warning. Prepare yourself. They will not stop until they have tested every bond, every secret, every weakness. And you are the center of it. I nodded, fear and anticipation twisting in my chest. The pull, the fascination, the forbidden's connection, everything I had felt for him, now carried a new weight. It was no longer just temptation. It was survival, danger, and the undeniable truth that his past had come to claim the present. As the shadows deepened, and the wind whispered through the trees, I realized the threat was no longer abstract. It was here, real, and we would have to face it together or be consumed by it. I couldn't sleep that night. The fire in the hearth had gone out hours ago, yet the air in my cottage felt heavy, like the world itself was holding its breath. Outside, the wind whispered through the forest, brushing against the glass with a sound almost like a voice. Anna. I sat up, heart hammering. That voice, it wasn't the wind. I reached for the lantern beside my bed, my hands trembling as I lit the wick. The faint orange glow spread across the room, revealing the shadows that clung to the corners. Everything looked normal, but it didn't feel normal. Ever since Kale, the stranger with eyes like molten gold, had appeared in my life, the air itself seemed to vibrate differently. I told myself it was coincidence, that the dreams, the shifting lights, the whispers at my window were just stress. But deep down, I knew better. Something ancient was stirring, and it was tied to me. The adoption. After they said I was cursed, the child I'd tried to bring home from the orphanage had been taken away, and they'd cast me out of the town like I was something unclean. Only Kale hadn't turned away. He had appeared from the mist one night, saving me from the wolves that circled the woods. His strength, his power, it had terrified me then. Now, it haunted me. I left my cottage and went to the forest edge, where the mist clung low to the earth. That's where I found the small leather pouch tied to my gatepost. Inside was an old locket blackened by age. When I opened it, a symbol was carved inside a crescent moon entwined with a claw mark. My breath caught. I'd seen that same mark before. On Cale's ring, and beneath it, written in faded ink, was a name I hadn't heard since childhood, Colon Aon. My father's name. I stumbled back, the locket slipping from my fingers. My father had vanished when I was 6. My mother told me he drowned during a storm on the coast. But even then, something about her eyes, haunted and uncertain, had told me there was more to the story. I knew. This wasn't coincidence. I ran, through the fog and pine needles, through the whispering air that seemed to chant my name. The forest grew darker with every step until the trees themselves seemed to bend away from the path. And then Cale appeared. "Anna," he said, stepping from the mist like a shadow made flesh. "You shouldn't be here." I held up the locket with shaking hands. "You've seen this before, haven't you?" He froze. His eyes flicked to the symbol, and for the first time since I met him, fear crossed his face. "Where did you get that?" he demanded, voice low. "It was left at my gate. My father's name is inside. Orion. You know him, don't you?" Cale looked away, his jaw tightening. "You shouldn't speak that name." "Why not?" I stepped closer. "Tell me the truth, Cale." His golden eyes met mine, full of something like sorrow. Because that man was not human. The silence that followed pressed down on me like a weight. I could hear the distant cry of a raven, the creak of the trees. "What are you saying?" I whispered. Cale's voice dropped to a near growl. "Orion was one of the first alphas. He ruled before the packs were divided, before your kind and mine drew lines between blood and soul." "My kind?" My throat tightened. "You mean a knot?" He took a slow step closer, his presence crackling in the air. "Your blood carries the mark of his legacy. You're part of his line. And that means, Anna, you are not what you think you are." The words crashed through me. "No," I said, shaking my head. "My mother, she was human. She loved him," Cale said softly. "But she could never truly know him. He hid what he was to protect her. To protect you." I staggered back, my breath catching in short bursts. "You're lying." Cale's gaze softened. "I wish I were." He reached out, hesitated, then took my hand. His skin was warm, too warm, and for a brief, dizzying moment, I felt it. The pulse of something ancient beneath my own blood. It was faint, but unmistakable. A low thrum, like a second heartbeat. Mine. Or maybe not mine at all. The ground beneath us trembled. The trees swayed violently, though the air was still. Somewhere in the distance, a howl tore through the silence. A sound that was neither human nor animal, but something in between. Cale's grip on my hand tightened. "They know," he said, his voice tense. "The bloodline has awakened. They can sense you now." "Who?" "The ones who betrayed your father. The ones who took his throne." Before I could respond, another sound echoed, this time closer. Heavy footsteps. The snapping of branches. The growl of something large moving toward us. Cale stepped in front of me, his body shifting slightly, his aura flaring like a storm. "Stay behind me," he said. "No matter what happens." The mist parted, and from it emerged a figure cloaked in shadow, eyes glowing red as embers. "Arian's child," the stranger rasped. "So it's true. The blood of the old alpha still flows." My heart slammed against my ribs. Cale's growl rumbled like thunder. "You'll not touch her." The figure smiled a cruel, knowing smile. "Too late, Cale. The hunt has already begun." Then, before my scream could even leave my throat, the world dissolved into darkness. When I woke, I was lying in Cale's arms, the locket still clutched in my hand. His face was pale, strained, his eyes fierce. "Anna," he said quietly, "you have to understand your father's blood makes you both powerful and hunted. You were never meant to live an ordinary life." Tears welled in my eyes. "Then what am I supposed to do?" He looked at me with something between love and sorrow. "Remember who you are," he whispered. "Because soon, they'll come for you. Trust not such a fragile thing." I used to think it was simple, built on kindness, honesty, a steady voice saying, "I'll protect you." But now I understood that trust was a battlefield. And I was standing in the middle of it, surrounded by shadows that all looked like Cale. For 2 nights after the attack, he kept me hidden in an old hunter's cabin deep in the forest. It was small, built of rough timber and cold stone, but somehow I felt safer there than anywhere else. Or at least, I wanted to feel safe. Cale barely spoke. He'd spent hours outside, standing guard, his eyes scanning the tree line as if waiting for something or someone. When he did come in, his face was carved in stone, his jaw tense, his hands trembling faintly when he thought I wasn't looking. I'd seen him fight for me. I'd seen him bleed for me. But still, a part of me whispered, "What is he hiding?" That morning, I found him near the stream, washing blood from his arms. "Whose blood is that?" I asked quietly. He didn't turn around. "Not mine. That doesn't answer my question." He looked up then, his golden eyes meeting mine. "You don't want to know." "But I do," I said, my voice rising. "You say you're protecting me, but from what, Cale? From who? You said my father's enemies are hunting me, but I know nothing about them. I know nothing about you." He stood, water dripping down his skin like liquid amber in the morning light. "I told you enough." "No," I said, stepping closer. "You told me half-truths and riddles." He sighed, and the sound was tired older than the trees themselves. "If I tell you everything, Anna, you'll never look at me the same way again." I swallowed hard. "Maybe you should let me decide that." He turned then, eyes flashing with something sharp and wounded. "You think I don't want to tell you? That it's easy carrying this? The moment you know who I really am, what I've done, you'll hate me. And that's something I can't risk." I wanted to shout that I already trusted him, that I wanted to know, but the words caught in my throat, because part of me, some deep, trembling part, was afraid he was right. I watched as he turned away, the early light catching the faint scar that cut across his shoulder. "What happened to my father?" I asked softly. He froze. When he spoke, his voice was low. "Your father died because of me." The world tilted. "What?" Cale's jaw tightened. "It wasn't supposed to happen that way. He was my alpha, my friend. You killed him." "No." His voice cracked, almost human in its pain. "But I failed him. And because of that, the others turned. The packs fractured. The ones loyal to him were hunted down." I shook my head, the words burning in my chest. "So why are you here now? Why me? Because of guilt?" Cale stepped forward, his eyes blazing. "Because you're his blood. Because the moment I saw you, I knew you carried his light. You're what's left of him." The air between us pulsed, part grief, part fury, part something I couldn't name. But before I could answer, the forest shifted. A branch snapped nearby. Then another. Cale moved instantly, his body rigid. "They found us." He grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the cabin. "Stay inside, no matter what happens." But I didn't listen. When the first wolf appeared at the tree line, its eyes red, its fur black as ink, I felt something stir inside me. A low, ancient rumble in my chest. My vision blurred, colors sharpening, senses stretching beyond human limits. Cale roared, shifting halfway into something monstrous and beautiful, his fangs glinting in the fading light. He fought like fire itself, swift, brutal, unrelenting. But for every enemy he threw back, 2 more came forward. And then I heard a voice among the growls. A man's voice. Anna. I turned and froze. A figure stood beyond the wolves, his face shadowed by a dark hood. But his voice, it was familiar. Anna, don't trust him, the stranger called. Cale's lying to you. He's been using you since the day you met. Cale spun, his eyes flashing with fury. Don't listen to him. Who is he? I shouted. Cale didn't answer. The stranger stepped forward, lowering his hood. His hair was silver, his eyes pale blue, the same color as mine. I'm your uncle, he said softly. Your father's brother. The world went still. My breath caught. My uncle? My mother had never mentioned a brother. Cale growled low, his body trembling with rage. He's lying. The man met my gaze calmly. He's not protecting you, Anna. He's hiding you from me. From your own family. Ask him why. I turned toward Cale. What is he talking about? Cale's silence was answer enough. The stranger smiled faintly. You see? He can't deny it. He served your father once, but he betrayed him. The night Orion fell, Cale chose the enemy's side. That's not true. Cale snarled. I tried to save him, but his words tangled in my mind. My father, my bloodline, betrayal, the truth hanging between them like a blade. I felt dizzy, caught between 2 monsters and the echo of my own heartbeat. Anna, Cale said softly, stepping closer. You have to trust me. I looked at him, the man who had saved me, the one who haunted my dreams, the one who claimed to protect me. But I couldn't speak, because when I looked into his golden eyes, I didn't see certainty anymore. I saw guilt. The wolves began to retreat into the mist. Following the silver-haired man, Cale reached for me, his hand trembling. Don't go with him. I stepped back. I don't know who to believe anymore. Believe what you feel, he whispered. But feelings were dangerous. They had already ruined everything. The silver-haired man's voice drifted through the mist one last time. He'll tell you the truth if you live long enough to hear it. Then he vanished, and I was left staring at Cale, my heart splintering in silence. That night, neither of us spoke. The fire crackled between us, throwing light on faces that once looked familiar and now seemed foreign. Every word unsaid felt heavier than stone. Was he my protector, or my father's betrayer? I didn't know anymore. All I knew was that trust, whatever it had been, was breaking. And once broken, even love could bleed. The days that followed were drenched in silence. Cale and I spoke only when necessary, short, clipped words that fell into the space between us like stones sinking in water. The forest around the cabin felt tighter, darker, as though it had begun to close its ribs around us. And the air. It wasn't just cold anymore. It was watching. At first, I thought it was only my mind playing tricks again. A snapped twig here, a shadow that moved when it shouldn't have there. But the feeling didn't leave me. It grew like something was breathing down my neck, just beyond the veil of trees. Even the birds had gone silent. Cale noticed too. I could see it in the way he lingered near the door at night, his shoulders tense, his hand never far from the blade at his belt. But when I asked, he only said, "Don't worry about it." That was how I knew I should worry. 3 nights after my supposed uncle's warning, I found the first sign. It was early morning. I went to fetch water from the stream and saw it carved into the dirt near the bank, an old sigil, sharp and precise, half hidden by frost. A crescent moon and a claw mark, the same mark from my father's locket, except this time there was blood smeared through the lines. I ran back to the cabin. breath catching in my throat. Cale. He was already outside, his body tense, his eyes scanning the tree line. You saw it too, he said grimly. Who did that? I asked, shaking. Scouts. They're marking territory. They've found us. My heart dropped. Then we have to leave. He didn't answer immediately. He just looked at me, studied me, like he was weighing something heavier than fear. Running won't save you anymore, he said quietly. They're not just after your blood, Anna. They're after what you can become. What does that mean? He looked away. It means the bloodline isn't done with you. We spent the day preparing for an attack that didn't come. Every sound made my pulse jump. Every flicker of shadow outside the window looked like eyes. But by nightfall, nothing had happened. I started to think maybe the threat had passed until I smelled smoke. Cale, I whispered. Do you smell that? He was already moving. The next second, he flung the door open, and the night was blazing. Fire. The trees nearest the cabin burned like torches, orange flames licking up their trunks. The smoke was thick, suffocating, the air roaring with heat. Cale's voice cut through the chaos. Go! Through the back. I stumbled after him, coughing, eyes watering. The cabin groaned behind us as it caught flame. Then came the growl. Not from the fire, but from the shadows. 3 figures stepped through the smoke, tall, broad, their eyes glowing red in the light. Wolves, half shifted into human form, their snarls sharp as razors. Get behind me, Cale said, his voice low, his body shifting before my eyes. Bones cracked, his muscles rippled, and fur tore through his skin as he transformed fully into his wolf form, a massive creature of black and silver. He lunged before the first enemy could move. The clash was brutal, raw, a blur of teeth and claws. The air filled with roars and the metallic scent of blood. I turned to run, but one of them grabbed me from behind, dragging me toward the burning trees. Got the girl, he shouted. I kicked and screamed, clawing at his arms. But he was too strong. Then through the smoke, I saw another figure, my supposed uncle. The silver-haired man. He stood beyond the flames, calm, untouched. Let her go, Cale snarled, blood dripping from his mouth. The man smiled. She'd come willingly soon enough. Why? I gasped, struggling against the wolf's grip. What do you want from me? His eyes glimmered, eerie and pale. You, child, are the key to unsealing what your father tried to bury. The Alpha's power, the old magic. It sleeps in your blood. My blood. Cale roared, breaking free from the 2 wolves he fought. He lunged toward the one holding me, tearing him away in a single motion. Run, he shouted. I did. Branches whipped my face, my breath ragged as I fled into the dark woods. Behind me, I heard the sounds of battle snarls, screams, snapping bones. Then, silence. A heavy, endless silence. I stopped running only when the forest thinned, and the air turned cold again. I stumbled into a small clearing, collapsing to my knees. My hands shook. My entire body was trembling. Cale didn't come. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Finally, I saw movement through the trees, a shadow limping toward me. Cale, I whispered. He stepped into the light, his face cut and bleeding, his chest heaving. He looked broken. They're gone, he said, voice hoarse. For now. I reached for him, but he flinched. What's wrong? He looked at me like he was seeing something that shouldn't exist. He said something before he vanished. About your blood. About your father's magic. I hesitated. He said the same to me. Cale's eyes darkened. Then it's true. What is? He took a shaky breath. Your father sealed something inside you when you were a child. a fragment of his own power. The ancient alphas gift the thing every rival wanted. That's why they're hunting you. The world tilted again. You knew? I whispered. I suspected, he said softly. But I prayed I was wrong. And you didn't tell me. I couldn't. If they knew you were awakening. I stepped back, fury breaking through my fear. So you did lie to me. Anna, don't. My voice cracked. You said you were protecting me. But all this time you were protecting your guilt. He didn't deny it. The firelight from the distant burning trees flickered against his face, painting him half in shadow, half in gold. I can't trust you, I whispered. Then trust what's inside you, he said. Because it's coming alive whether you want it or not. A gust of wind swept through the clearing, carrying the smell of ash and something else, something sharp and metallic. Cale turned his head sharply. We need to move. Now. But before we could, another howl rose through the night, long and deep and close. Not just one this time. Many, surrounding. U.S. The shadows between the trees began to move, pairs of glowing eyes, appearing one by one until the entire forest seemed alive with red fire. Cale took a defensive stance, his claws lengthening again. They've surrounded us, he said quietly. I swallowed hard. What do we do? He looked at me, his gaze heavy with regret. You fight or you fall. The circle tightened. And just before the first wolf lunged, just before chaos swallowed the night, something inside me snapped. A pulse of white light exploded from my chest, throwing every creature backward. The world went silent. Cale stared at me, eyes wide. Anna, but I didn't understand what I'd done. All I knew was that every pair of red eyes around us now turned toward me, and they weren't afraid anymore. The night after the attack was thick with silence. The forest still smoked in the distance, and ashes drifted through the air like grey snow. Cale and I had found shelter in a half-ruined chapel hidden among the pines. Its stone walls cracked, its roof half-collapsed, its altar long abandoned. The moonlight poured through the broken ceiling, silvering everything it touched. I sat near the altar, trembling hands wrapped around my knees. My body still burned from the light that had burst out of me earlier. That power, it had felt like both salvation and death. Cale watched me from across the chapel. His shirt was torn, streaked with blood, though I couldn't tell if it was his. He hadn't spoken since we arrived. His silence scared me more than the wolves ever had. Finally, I whispered, What happened to me? He looked up slowly, his eyes reflecting the moonlight like liquid gold. Your blood woke up. That light, it came from me? Yes. His voice was quiet but not calm. It carried awe, fear, maybe even reverence. It's the Alpha's mark, the oldest kind of power, the one your father carried before the fall. My breath trembled. Then why did it feel like it was killing me? He walked closer, kneeling beside me. His scent earth, smoke, rain wrapped around me until the world felt smaller, quieter, because it's too strong for a body that hasn't accepted it yet. You're fighting what you are. And what am I, Cale? His gaze locked onto mine. You're his heir, the true Alpha's bloodline. And now, every creature that still walks under the old law will come for you. I stared at him, my chest tightening. Then why stay? You said you failed my father. You could leave, run. His eyes darkened. Because I won't fail again. The words hung in the air between us. I wanted to be angry, to throw his guilt back at him. But my heart betrayed me. Every time I looked at him, every time he said my name in that low, steady voice, something inside me softened. He was danger and comfort wrapped in one impossible man. I whispered, "You keep saying you failed him. But what if protecting me means repeating the same mistake?" Kale's jaw tightened. "And I'll make it again. And again. As long as you live. You can't keep throwing yourself between me and everything that wants me dead." His gaze flicked over my face, lingering on my lips. "That's not why I do it." Something shifted in my chest. The air grew heavy, electric. "Then why?" I breathed. Kale's hand brushed mine. A slow, hesitant touch rough skin against trembling fingers. "Because you're the first thing that's made me feel alive in centuries." I froze. Centuries. The word echoed inside me. "You, Kale? How old are you?" He smiled faintly. "Old enough to know better than to want you." "Then stop wanting me. I've tried." His voice was low, breaking. "Gods, I've tried." The chapel seemed to pulse around us. The flicker of moonlight, the scent of smoke and pine, the silence humming like a heartbeat. I should have stepped away. I should have remembered the danger closing in on us. But I didn't. Because for that single moment, nothing else existed. Not the past, not the bloodline, not the wolves waiting in the shadows. Only him. He reached up, fingers brushing a strand of hair from my cheek. His touch sent a shiver down my spine, an ache blooming deep in my chest. I whispered, "This is wrong." He didn't deny it, but his hand lingered. His eyes softened. And when he spoke again, his voice trembled with the truth neither of us could silence. "It's the only thing that feels right." The world slowed. The distance between us vanished until I could feel his breath on my skin, warm and unsteady. I could hear my heart pounding, could feel the pull between us like gravity. It wasn't gentle, it was desperate, like the earth itself was demanding we give in. When his forehead touched mine, I forgot how to breathe. "Anna," he murmured, his voice breaking. "If I cross this line, I won't be able to go back." "Then don't," I whispered. His fingers slid beneath my chin, lifting my face toward his. The moment felt infinite charge, forbiddance. Real dot, and then the air shattered. The chapel door burst open, slamming against the wall with a crash that echoed through the ruins. Kale spun instantly, his body shielding mine. A tall figure stepped through the doorway, framed by moonlight dot, not my uncle this time. A woman. She was beautiful in a cruel, impossible way tall, pale, with hair the color of storm clouds and eyes that glowed faintly violet. Her presence filled the chapel like a storm that had been waiting centuries to break. "Still chasing ghosts, Kale?" she purred. "Or have you truly fallen for one?" Kale's entire body went rigid. His voice was low, almost a growl. "Selene." The name hit me like ice water. "Who is she?" I asked. Selene smiled a slow, cutting smile. "His past. His failure. His curse." Kale's claws extended, the air around him vibrating. "You shouldn't have come." "I had to," she said, her eyes flicking toward me. "The Alpha's daughter. The key to restoring the throne. You've kept her hidden long enough." Kale's stance shifted. Protective, lethal. "You'll touch her over my dead body." Selene laughed softly. "Oh, Kale. That can be arranged." Before I could even react, she raised her hand and a gust of power slammed into us like a wall of wind and lightning. The chapel windows exploded. Stone cracked, and Kale was thrown backward into the altar, shattering it to pieces. I screamed his name, reaching for him, but Selene's eyes locked on me, glowing brighter now, almost blinding. "Your father took something from me, little one," she whispered, "and you're going to give it back." Then she lifted her hand again, and the world went white. When my vision cleared, Kale was on his feet again, blood streaking down his face, his eyes burning gold. He stood between me and Celine, his voice a low snarl. "Run, Anna. I'm not leaving you. Run." Before I could move, Celine lunged faster than anything human, her claws glowing with light. Kale met her halfway, their collision shaking the ground beneath us. And as I stumbled back, heart hammering, I knew this was only the beginning. The past Kale had tried to bury had finally found us. And this time, it wouldn't stop until one of them was dead. The forest burned again. Not with fire this time, but with light. Wild and merciless. Kale and Celine clashed in the ruined chapel, their powers igniting like twin storms. Every strike cracked the ground, every roar split the night. I stumbled backward through the shattered doorway, hands over my ears, but the sound still lived inside my skull like the sky was breaking open. "Kale," I screamed. "Stop. You'll destroy each other." But neither could hear me anymore. He fought like a beast unleashed, eyes glowing molten gold, his claws slashing through air and shadow. She moved like a whisper, elegant, deadly, her silver magic twisting through the dark like liquid moonlight. When their powers collided, the explosion threw me to the ground. I hit the dirt hard, the breath knocked from my lungs. The smell of burnt pine and stone filled the air. I blinked through the smoke and froze. Kale was on his knees, blood running down his neck. Celine stood above him, her claws inches from his throat. "Still protecting what you can't keep," she hissed. "You haven't changed." "Neither have you," he growled and lunged. They crashed through what was left of the chapel wall and into the forest beyond. I ran after them, heart slamming against my ribs, feet cutting on broken glass and roots. Moonlight spilled through the trees in wild shards as their fight moved deeper into the woods. I could hear Kale's voice low, pained, but also Celine's laughter, sharp as steel. Then, suddenly, silence. I pushed through a thicket and froze again. They were standing in a small clearing, breathing hard, facing each other. Kale's shirt was torn to ribbons, his skin marked with glowing cuts that refused to heal. Celine's magic flickered around her hands, unstable, like it wanted to devour her. "Why, Celine?" Kale rasped. "You were supposed to protect the Alpha's line. I was supposed to rule beside him." She screamed. "But he chose you, his cursed half-breed soldier, over me." Kale's expression shattered. "He loved you, and you destroyed him." Her eyes filled with tears, but they didn't fall. "No, Kale, you did. You let him die so she could live." Her gaze cut to me. My heart stopped. What does she mean? I whispered. Kale didn't answer. "Tell her," Celine demanded. "Tell the girl how her father truly died." "Enough!" Kale's roar shook the trees, but Celine only smiled, broken and cruel. "You think your father fell in battle?" she asked, her voice trembling. "He didn't. Kale killed him. To protect you." The world tilted. I couldn't breathe. "That's not true." Celine's eyes gleamed. "Ask him." Kale turned toward me, and the look on his face said everything before his lips even moved. "I tried to save him," he said, voice raw. "He was dying. Celine struck him first. He begged me to take you and run." Kale stopped, the words splintering in his throat. "He made me end it, to spare him from the curse." I shook my head. No, you're lying." Celine stepped closer, her tone soft, almost kind. "You see, little heir, even your savior has blood on his hands. Your father's blood." "Stop," Kale said through clenched teeth. But the damage was done. Something inside me cracked open. All the trust, all the warmth that had grown between us, bled out like smoke. You should have told me, I whispered. Kale's face was pure agony. I couldn't. You weren't ready. Not ready? I've been hunted, cursed, burned alive, and you still thought I wasn't ready for the truth. Selene watched us, almost satisfied, as if every wound between us was her victory. Kale took a step toward me, desperate. Anna, please, don't. My voice broke. You don't get to say my name right now. For the first time, Kale looked lost. The man who had faced monsters and walked through centuries now looked like someone crumbling from the inside out. He took another step forward, but Selene raised her hand. Enough, she said softly. You've already taken everything from me, Kale. I won't let you take her too. Light gathered in her palm, blinding, sharp. Kale turned instantly, throwing himself between us. Run! The blast hit him square in the chest. The sound tore through me, like the earth itself had cried out. Kale flew backward, crashing through a fallen tree. Smoke rose from his body. I screamed his name and ran to him, but Selene's magic coiled around my arms, holding me back. Let me go. She'll come for you next, Selene whispered. And when she does, you'll thank me for ending this now. Her power tightened, suffocating. I gasped, clawing at the air dot, then Kale moved. Even broken and bleeding, he launched himself at her, his claws sinking into the earth as he ripped through the magic holding me. Run, Anna, he shouted again. But I didn't move. I couldn't. He turned his head just enough to look at me, and in his eyes I saw it. The thing I tried to deny. The thing that terrified me most. Love. Pure, ruinous love. Selene's power flared once more, and this time Kale didn't block it. He took the full force of it, using his own body to shield me. When the light faded, he was on his knees, smoke curling from his wounds. Selene staggered back, spent, her face pale and furious. You'll regret this, Kale. The Alpha's curse doesn't end with her. It ends with you. She disappeared into a cloud of silver mist, leaving silence and ruin in her wake. The only sound left was my heartbeat and Kale's shallow breathing. I crawled toward him, tears burning my face. Kale, stay with me, please. He tried to smile, blood staining his lips. You see now why I never wanted you to know. Don't talk like that. You're going to be fine. He shook his head weakly. No, you need to go. They'll come for you next. I'm not leaving you. He reached up, fingers trembling, brushing a tear from my cheek. You have your father's heart. Strong, stubborn. Kale, his hand fell away. Panic surged through me. I pressed my hands over his wounds, whispering his name over and over, but his eyes had gone distant, half-lidded, fading. Please, I begged. Don't leave me too. The forest whispered back with nothing but wind. Finally, his chest rose once more. Barely. Then he whispered, Forgive me, little Alpha, and went still. The moon slid behind the clouds. The night swallowed everything. I sat there shaking, holding him as if I could keep him from vanishing too. But the forest had other plans. From the shadows, a howl rose, a long, low sound that echoed with pain and fury. Then another, and another. Dozens of eyes glowed in the darkness, circling. Kale's pack, or what was left of it. I knew what they would see. Their Alpha's killer's daughter, holding his broken body. And as their growls deepened, I understood the cruel truth. Selene had won. Not by killing us. But by tearing us apart. The forest was no longer silent. Growls rippled through the air, low, furious, inhuman. Dozens of eyes shimmered in the darkness around me, watching, waiting. Kale's body lay motionless in my lap, his skin cooling beneath the pale wash of the moonlight. I could still feel the warmth of him in my hands. Fading with every heartbeat, my tears had stopped. There was no more left to give. Only a deep, endless ache. Then, the largest shadow moved forward. A wolf massive, black as pitch, with silver streaks through its fur, stepped into the light. His eyes gleamed gold, wild and knowing. I recognized him. Riven, Kale's second. He stopped a few feet away, growling softly. Then he looked down at Kale, then at me. The rage in his gaze burned bright. "He died for you," he said, his voice rough, trembling through the night air. "And you still breathe." "I didn't kill him," I whispered, my throat raw. "Selene did. Selene's gone. And the Alpha's dead." Riven took another step closer. "That makes you nothing." His words cut like ice. Behind him, the pack murmured snarls, growls, restless movement. I could feel their hatred crawling across my skin like static. "Leave," Riven ordered. "Before we forget his mercy." Mercy. The word burned. Kale had given his life to protect me. And still they saw me as the curse, the outsider, the reason their Alpha had fallen. I looked down at him, his face peaceful now. Though his body still bore the marks of Selene's fury, I wanted to scream, to fight, to tear the sky apart. But I did nothing. I only brushed a lock of hair from his brow and whispered, "I'll find a way to bring the truth to light. I swear it." Riven's growl deepened. "Your words mean nothing here." And with that, he howled a sound that shook the trees, and the pack vanished back into the forest. Shadows melting into mist, leaving me alone. Completely alone. Hours passed, or maybe it was only minutes. The forest bled into dawn, pale and grey. I didn't move. Couldn't. Kale's body had grown cold. His blood had dried into my clothes. When the first light touched his face, something shimmered faint, like smoke. A symbol, etched across his collarbone. Just above his heart, it glowed softly, an intricate circle of lines and runes, pulsing once before fading. I reached out, my fingers trembling, tracing it gently. It felt warm, alive. Then, for just a second, I heard him. "Find the hollow." I froze. His voice soft, distant but unmistakable. "Kale?" I whispered. The forest gave no answer. But the mark pulsed again, faintly before vanishing completely. A cryptic message. A thread in the dark. And suddenly, the fog of despair cracked just slightly. I had something. A clue. The world beyond the forest wasn't kind. By the time I reached the village, the news had already spread. "The Alpha is dead," people whispered. "The curse has returned." Doors closed when I walked past. Curtains shifted. Children were pulled inside. To them, I was the girl who brought ruin. The orphan who carried the Alpha's blood, but none of his grace. I ignored the stairs and headed straight for the only place I could think of, the church. It was empty, the air thick with wax and dust. The priest, Father Elias, had known my father once. He'd known Kale too. When I stepped inside, he turned from the altar, his expression wary. "Anna, I need your help," I said. He studied me in silence. "You shouldn't be here. They say the wolves hunt you now." "I don't care." I stepped closer. "Kale's dead. Selene killed him. But before my voice broke and I forced it steady. Before he died, he said something. Find the hollow. Do you know what that means?" Father Elias's face paled. "The hollow?" "Yes." He took a shaky breath. "It's not a place you find. It's a place that finds you." "What does that mean?" He looked toward the window, where sunlight bled through the cracked glass. "It's an old legend. Older than the pack. The hollow is where the first alpha's blood was sealed, where the bond between human and beast began. Some say it holds the truth of the curse. The curse? He nodded slowly. Your bloodline's curse. The one that began with your father's father. My stomach twisted. So it's real. Elias's eyes softened. Real enough to kill men like Cale trying to break it. He stepped closer and placed a trembling hand on my shoulder. If you go looking for the hollow, child, you won't come back the same. It's where the veil thins. Where the moon chooses who lives and who doesn't. I met his gaze, unflinching. I don't care what it takes. I'm not running anymore. I left the village before dusk, ignoring the whispers that followed. The forest stretched ahead endless, dark and humming with unseen life. The path to the hollow wasn't marked, but something inside me, something instinctive, knew where to go. It was like a pull in my chest, a rhythm beneath my heartbeat guiding me deeper into the trees. By nightfall, mist gathered again. I walked for hours, until my legs trembled and my vision blurred. And then I saw it. A clearing I'd never noticed before, surrounded by trees that glowed faintly under the moonlight. In the center stood a stone arch, covered in symbols that pulsed with silver light. The same pattern that had burned across Cale's skin. My breath caught. The hollow, I whispered. The air around me shifted. The temperature dropped. The ground seemed to hum beneath my feet. And then, a voice. Soft. Familiar. You found it. I turned sharply. No one was there. But I felt him. Cale. His presence brushed against my mind like wind through leaves. It wasn't his body. It was his essence, his soul. You're not gone, I whispered. You're here. A faint warmth touched my chest. The mark he'd left glowing faintly through my shirt. Not for long, his voice murmured. The hollow remembers. It can restore what's been lost. But it demands truth. Truth. Yours. The air pulsed once more and the arch shimmered brighter, its center filling with swirling silver mist. I took a trembling breath, my fear and grief twisting together into something fierce. If there was even a chance to bring Cale back, or at least to uncover the truth behind his death, my father's curse, and everything that had torn us apart, then I had to take it. No matter what waited on the other side. Stepped toward the arch. The ground trembled, and the world turned to light. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in the forest anymore. I was standing in a vast expanse of silver fog. The air shimmered, weightless. Whispers surrounded me, voices that sounded both near and far. And ahead, through the mist, a shape began to form. A doorway of light. And behind it, a heartbeat. Steady. Familiar. Cale single quotes S.I. took one step forward. Whispering, I'm coming. The mist pulsed in response, parting just enough to reveal something carved into the stone before the doorway. Words, glowing faintly. Blood remembers what love cannot forget. I didn't know what it meant. Not yet. But as I placed my hand over the mark on my chest, I felt something stir inside me. Power, raw and ancient. The same power that had run through Cale. Through my father. Through the line of alphas before me. And for the first time since the night he died, I didn't feel broken. I felt awake. The mist swallowed everything. Sound, time, even thought. I stood on trembling ground that wasn't quite solid, surrounded by endless silver fog that breathed like a living thing. Every inhale brought whispers I couldn't quite understand, ancient voices, murmuring in the language of blood and moonlight. And beneath it all, I heard a heartbeat. Steady. Slow. Familiar. Cale single quotes S. My pulse quickened. Cale? The fog shivered, coiling tighter around me. Shapes moved within it, half-formed memories, flashes of the forest, the chapel. His eyes as he whispered, forgive me. I stepped forward, following the sound. Each step felt heavier than the last, like wading through grief itself. But then the mist parted and there he was. Cale stood a few feet away, half shadow, half light. His body seemed real, yet not entirely of this world. The wounds on his chest were gone, replaced by faint silver scars that pulsed with an otherworldly glow. His eyes found mine immediately, golden, burning, haunted, for a heartbeat. We just stared at each other. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. Then he whispered, "You shouldn't have come." I had to. My voice cracked. "You told me to find the hollow. I found it. It brought me here." He looked away, his jaw tightening. "It wasn't supposed to bring you. It was supposed to bring truth." "Then maybe the truth is me," I said, taking a step closer. His expression softened just a flicker, but it was enough to unravel something inside me. "I thought you were gone," I whispered. "I buried you. I watched the life leave your eyes." Cale closed the distance in 2 strides, stopping just before me. "I was gone," he said softly. "Part of me still is." The air between us thrummed, alive. I could feel his presence like heat, like gravity. "What is this place?" I asked. "The hollow," he said. "The veil between life and the curse. Between what we were and what we became." He turned slightly, looking out into the endless mist. "This is where the first Alpha made his vow. He traded love for strength, heart for power. And every heir since has carried that wound. My father." Cale nodded. "And you?" The truth pressed against my chest like a stone. "Then I was never just human." "No," he said. "You were always something more." The way he said it made my pulse stutter. There was awe in his voice and sorrow. I looked up at him, searching his face. "Why didn't you tell me?" His jaw tightened. "Because love made me weak once. I wasn't going to let it destroy you too." Anger flared, cutting through the ache. "You think lying saved me? You think letting me believe my father died a hero while you carried the blame was mercy?" He met my gaze, fierce. "Yes, because the truth would have killed you. It almost did anyway." The silence that followed was heavy, raw, and unhealed. The mist curled around us, whispering fragments of memories neither of us wanted to remember. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to scream at him. But all I could feel was the magnetic ache that had always existed between us, familiar, terrible, alive. He reached out, hesitated, then touched my cheek. His fingers were cold, like moonlight, but real. "You don't belong here," he said softly. "If you stay, the hollow will keep you. It feeds on longing. It won't let go. Then come with me." Cale's eyes dimmed. "I can't. I'm bound here now. Between life and the curse. Between your blood and his." "My father's?" He nodded slowly. "He's here too. His echo at least. He was the last Alpha before me." I felt my breath catch. "Then he'll know the truth." "Maybe. But he won't be who you remember." The mist began to shift, forming faint outlines of trees, faces, fragments of memory. The hollow was showing me what it wanted me to see, glimpses of past lives, promises, betrayals. Cale stepped closer until our foreheads almost touched. "Anna," he whispered, voice low and rough. "You have to listen to me. Selene isn't finished. Killing me wasn't her goal, it was only her beginning. She's trying to wake the blood moon." I froze. "The blood moon?" He nodded. "It's what binds our kind. Once every century, its light restores power to the Alpha's line or destroys it completely. If she controls it, she controls everything. And you think I can stop her?" Cale looked into my eyes, and the answer was already there. You're the last true heir of the Alpha's blood. The Hollow called you for a reason. The ground trembled faintly beneath us, as if the Hollow itself approved or warned. Then I need your help, I said, gripping his hand. I can't fight her alone. You won't be alone, he said softly. Not as long as you remember me. I swallowed hard. That's not enough. I can't go back without you, Cale. He smiled faintly sadly. You already carry me, look. He lifted my hand and pressed it to my heart. Beneath my skin, the faint mark from before flared to life again, the same glowing circle that had burned across his chest. It's the bond, he murmured. The Hollow sealed it the moment I fell. My strength flows through you now. My blood. My will. I stared at him, tears blurring my vision. Then we're not just bound by fate. We're bound by choice. His gaze softened. Yes, but choice comes with a cost. What cost? Cale hesitated, then leaned in close, his breath brushing my ear. If you bring me back, he whispered, you'll break the veil and become what your father feared most. A true alpha. The words hung between us like thunder. I didn't know if I was ready for that kind of power, but looking into his eyes, seeing both life and loss tangled in them, I knew one thing. I would rather carry the curse than let him fade forever. The Hollow pulsed again, brighter now. The mist began to thin, revealing faint paths of light weaving outward, each leading to a different memory, a different truth. Cale took my hand and pressed something into my palm. A pendant, shaped like a crescent moon, faintly glowing. What is this? I asked. A key, he said. When the blood moon rises, it will open the gate between our worlds. But promise me something. Anna, don't use it unless you're ready to face the truth of what you are. I promise, I whispered. But the words felt fragile, because deep down, I already knew I would break that promise if it meant saving him. Cale's expression shifted tender, conflicted. You always were too much like your father. Then maybe that's exactly what this world needs, I said. He smiled faintly. Then make it remember his name. I will, I whispered. And yours? The Hollow began to shimmer again. His form flickered like light on water. I'll find you, I said, gripping his hand tighter. You already have, he murmured. Then he leaned forward and pressed his forehead against mine, his voice barely a breath, until the blood moon. And with that, he vanished, leaving behind only mist, and the faint pulse of the pendant in my palm. I stood there, trembling, alone again, but not broken this time. The Hollow had shown me despair, truth, and love beyond life itself, but it had also given me something new. Purpose. Cale wasn't gone. Selene wasn't finished, and I wasn't afraid anymore. I slipped the glowing pendant around my neck, feeling its warmth settle against my heart. The mist whispered one final word as it began to fade. Remember, the moon was a silver blade slashing through the clouds that night. The air felt like static alive, trembling, full of the kind of silence that came before a storm or a death. I stood on the ridge above the valley. The forest sprawled beneath me like a sleeping beast. Every tree, every shadow, every breath of wind whispered the same truth. This was where it would end up behind me. Darius stood in half darkness, his presence both comfort and torment. His eyes gleamed faintly, wolf and man both watching me. You don't have to do this, he said, his voice a low rumble that carried across the distance between us. I didn't turn around. Yes, I do. Because everything had led here. The whispers, the bloodline, the betrayal that tore the pack apart, the child I'd once tried to save, the one they said brought the curse back, the one who was never just a baby, but the vessel of an ancient prophecy. My family had tried to bury Dot, And now the thing that wanted her, the thing that had hunted me since the night I adopted her, was waiting in the dark. "You're shaking," Darius said softly. "You're afraid." I gave a hollow laugh. "Wouldn't you be? We're walking into a trap set by something that's been killing your kind for centuries." He stepped closer, his warmth brushing my back. "Then we make it the last trap it ever sets." When I turned, the wind tore through my coat, but his gaze was what truly stripped me bare. There was no anger left there, only fierce, resigned devotion. We had been through betrayal, separation, blood and fire, and still, he had come back for me. "We fight together," I said. His hand brushed my cheek. "Always." Then he shifted, bones cracking, body contorting, until the wolf stood in his place, massive and black as night, eyes glowing like burning amber. My breath caught, not from fear, but from awe. We descended into the valley. The forest seemed alive, pulsing with dark energy. The trees leaned inward, branches dripping mist. Somewhere in the distance, a low growl echoed a sound that didn't belong to any creature I'd ever known. When we reached the clearing, the air turned thick, the earth humming beneath our feet. A circle of old stones rose from the ground, etched with the same symbols I'd seen carved on my childhood. Home. And standing in the center of it was her. The Mother of Shadows. The first curse. The one who had claimed my ancestors' souls and fed on their guilt for generations. Her body was draped in mist and shadow, but her eyes, those impossible eyes, were the color of fresh blood. "You came, child," she purred, voice smooth as silk and venom. "Just as the stars foretold. You and the beast." Darius growled low, circling her. I held my ground. "You've taken enough," I said. "You won't have her." The creature tilted her head. "You speak of the child, but you do not understand, do you? She is mine already. My mark burns in her blood." Rage flared hot in my chest. "Then you'll have to go through me to keep it there." Her laughter rolled through the clearing like thunder. "So be it." The ground split. Shadows burst upward, forming the shapes of wolves made of smoke and memory. They lunged. Darius met them, first fangs and claws flashing in the silver light. His growls turned to roars as he tore through the dark beasts, his body a blur of fury and light. I ran to the stones, chanting the words my father had left me in his final letter, that ancient vow of severance, the spell of the first blood. The symbols began to glow, the air vibrating with heat. "Stop," the mother screamed, her form twisting. "You cannot break what was forged in death." But I kept going, my voice breaking, tears streaming down my face as the power built inside me. Every memory, every loss, every ounce of love I had ever felt for that little girl, for the pack, for Darius fueling the storm around me. The ground shook violently. Darius howled, leaping between me and a streak of shadow that lunged for my heart. It struck him instead. He fell. "Darius!" I screamed. The mother's laughter echoed as he lay motionless. "Love is the sweetest weakness," she whispered. Something inside me shattered. The circle blazed white, my body lifting off the ground. When I spoke again, it wasn't just my voice. It was every voice of the bloodline before me. "You call it weakness," I said. "But it's the only thing that ever defied you." Light exploded outward. The mother shrieked a sound like the ripping of the world. Shadows evaporated into smoke, pulled into the burning symbols until nothing but silence remained. When I fell to my knees, the stones were cold again. The forest still, the curse gone. And Darius, he stirred. Slowly, painfully. His golden eyes opened and I let out a sob I didn't know I was holding. I crawled to him, clutching his fur, whispering his name like a prayer. The first pale threads of dawn were breaking over the treetops. "It's over," I said. He shifted back into human form, bloodied but alive. "No," he rasped, brushing his thumb over my tear-stained cheek. "It's just beginning." I looked at him, at the sun rising behind his silhouette, and felt the strange calm that comes only after surviving the impossible. The prophecy had said, I'd either die by love or be reborn through it. And as his hand closed around mine, I realized which one had come true. The dawn that followed was not gentle. It came like fire over horizon red, unrelenting, alive with the scent of ash and blood. The valley below still trembled from the battle, the ancient stones smoking with the remnants of burned shadow. I stood in the wreckage, the frost melting beneath my boots, my heart split between triumph and terror. The curse was gone, or so I thought, but the stillness didn't feel right. It was too heavy, too final. Darius stood beside me, shirt torn, skin streaked with blood and earth. His eyes, usually molten gold, flickered with unease. "She's not gone," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What do you mean?" "I saw her vanish. I felt her break apart." He shook his head slowly. "Evil like that doesn't die. It hides. It waits." The wind shifted then low, mournful, carrying with it a faint cry. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was something in between. My blood went cold. "The child," I whispered. Darius's head snapped toward me, his body tensing as his senses sharpened. "Where is she?" I ran. Branches tore at my clothes as I stumbled through the forest, heart pounding in my throat. The light grew dim again, the morning swallowed by an unnatural fog. And then I saw her, my daughter, standing in the clearing, barefoot in the dew, eyes glowing faintly red. "Lila," I gasped, breathless. "Sweetheart, it's me." She tilted her head in that eerie way children do when something inside them is too old for their small bodies. "She says you can't protect me anymore, Mama." My heart twisted. Who says that? The air behind her shimmered. And then she appeared. What was left of the Mother of Shadows. No longer whole but fragmented, her body flickering like smoke trying to hold form. Her voice slithered through the air. "Did you really think breaking my vessel would end me?" She hissed. "You severed the curse, yes, but the blood still remembers. The child is the key, and through her I live." Darius burst into the clearing, growling low in his throat, the sound more animal than man. "You won't touch her." The mother laughed, her voice echoing in the trees. "She's already mine. She carries both of you inside her, Wolf and Witch. The perfect vessel." I stepped forward, trembling. "You want a vessel?" I said, forcing the words through my tears. "Take me instead." The mother paused. "You would offer yourself so freely. If it ends this, if it saves her, yes." Darius grabbed my arm. "No, you don't know what you're saying." "I do," I said, looking into his eyes. "It was my bloodline that called her, my mistake that brought her here. I can end it." The mother smiled, her form swirling closer, her voice thick with mockery and delight. "A willing sacrifice. How poetic." She reached toward me, her hand like a wisp of shadow, brushing my cheek. Instantly, agony flared through my body, cold, electric, endless. I fell to my knees as my vision blurred, darkness crawling in from the edges. Darius roared, shifting mid-motion, lunging at her. But every blow he struck went through her like smoke. "Stop," I screamed, clutching at the dirt. "You'll only feed her." My daughter cried out, her small hands covering her ears. "Make it stop." Something inside me broke open, not my body, but my will. A memory surfaced, my father's words, the last thing he ever said before he died. The curse began with love twisted into fear. Only love untainted can end it. I crawled toward Lila, ignoring the pain ripping through my body. I cupped her face with trembling hands. "Listen to me," I whispered. "You're stronger than her. She only wins if you're afraid. Do you hear me?" Tears streamed down her cheeks. "But she's inside me. Then let her feel what she's never felt before." I pressed my forehead to hers. "Love her. Don't fight her, love her." The moment our foreheads touched, warmth bloomed between us, pure, blinding, golden light. It poured from Lila's small hands, from my heart, from everything that had ever been torn and made whole again. The light wasn't power, it was forgiveness, the mother shrieked, writhing as the radiance burned through her smoky form. "No! You cannot destroy me with—" Her words fractured, her shape unraveling like mist under the sun. And then silence. The fog lifted. The forest sighed. The curse was truly gone. But I collapsed. My body felt weightless, drained, my spirit floating somewhere between worlds. I heard Darius's voice distantly roar, breaking. "Stay with me," he said, cradling me. "Don't you dare leave now." I tried to smile, but my lips wouldn't move. "It's over." He shook his head, his tears falling onto my face. "Not like this." The world dimmed. My heartbeat slowed. For a moment, I thought I'd slip away into that soft, endless quiet. But then, a small hand pressed against mine. Lila. Her eyes were clear again, human, brown, shining. "Don't go, Mama," she whispered, and in that fragile, trembling voice was the same light that had just saved us. Warmth spread through my chest, pulling me back from the dark edge. My lungs filled again, my body trembling with life. Darius gasped, holding me tighter as color returned to my skin. "You did it," he said, disbelief and relief tangled in his voice. "You broke the curse." "No," I whispered. "We did." The sun finally broke through the trees, spilling light over us, real light this time, golden and alive. Darius brushed his thumb across my cheek, his voice low and reverent. "You were never just my mate," he said. "You were the reason I found my soul again." I looked at the little girl between us, the one who had carried darkness and light in equal measure, and felt something new take root inside me. Destiny hadn't been about power. It had been about choosing love over fear, again and again, even when it broke you. I rose to my feet, hand in Darius's, Lila nestled between us. Behind us, the valley was still smoking from the war we'd survived. Ahead of us, the first real dawn in generations. And though I knew peace never lasted forever, for the first time, I believed in something more enduring hope. The forest had changed in the weeks after the battle. It no longer whispered in warning or wept in the rain. It breathed. It lived again. Morning sunlight touched the branches gently now, as if the woods had been holding its breath for centuries and could finally exhale. I often came here alone to listen, to remember, to make peace with what could never be undone. The valley below had been cleansed by fire and forgiveness. The ancient stones where blood and shadow once met were now covered in moss and wildflowers. And though no trace of the curse remained, I could still feel echoes of it sometimes, a faint hum beneath the earth. A reminder that darkness, once broken, always leaves a scar. Darius stood at the edge of the clearing, his silhouette strong against the gold of the rising sun. His presence still stirred something deep inside me. A quiet ache that wasn't pain, but something close to longing. He turned when he sensed me. "You came," he said softly. "I always do." We hadn't spoken much since that day. There had been too many wounds to name, too many souls lost, too much rebuilding to do. The pack had scattered and reformed under new vows built not on bloodlines or power, but on choice. For the first time in generations, they were free. And me? I was still learning how to be. Lila ran ahead of me now, her laughter echoing through the trees. The light caught her hair, making it shimmer with the faintest copper glow her father's color, though her eyes were mine. She'd been untouched by darkness since that day, though sometimes, when she slept, I heard her whisper names I didn't recognize. Names from a time long before mine. Does she remember? Darius asked, watching her spin through the sunlight. Some of it, I said, but not the pain. Only the light. He smiled faintly. Good. We stood there for a moment, just breathing the same air, letting silence say what words couldn't. There had been passion between us, once wild, forbidden, consuming. But now, what lingered felt older, deeper. Like the bond between two souls who had bled together and learned to forgive the universe for it. She's growing fast, he murmured. I nodded. Faster than she should. Sometimes I think the forest still hums through her veins. She carries the balance, he said. Shadow and sun. She's proof that both can exist in one heart. His gaze drifted to me, soft but fierce. Like her mother. Something in my chest tightened. I wanted to tell him how many nights I'd dreamed of him, of that moment when I'd thought I'd lost him forever. I wanted to tell him that I still woke up reaching for the space where his warmth should have been. That some truths belong only to the quiet between two heartbeats. He stepped closer, his hand brushing mine. The contact sent that familiar rush through me, part electricity, part memory. You saved us all, he said. No, I whispered. We saved each other. He studied me for a long moment, then said something that almost undid me. You don't belong in the ruins anymore, Myra. You deserve the light you fought for. And you? His smile was bittersweet. The wolf doesn't live in sunlight. My place is here between the worlds, guarding what's left. I shook my head. You don't have to carry that alone. He tilted his head, a faint smile curving his lips. I was never alone. You live in every breath this forest takes, every dawn it wakes to. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. So this is goodbye? No, he said, stepping close enough for me to feel his heartbeat through the air. This is forever, just in another form. The words sank deep, their truth both beautiful and unbearable. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his touch lingering just long enough to leave a ghost of warmth. When she's older, tell her about the blood moon, he said. Tell her why the wolves sing to it. I will. And tell her that love, he added quietly, is not a curse. It's the echo that keeps us alive. Then, with a look that would haunt me for the rest of my days, he turned and walked into the trees. The forest swallowed him gently, as if welcoming back one of its own. The light flickered through the leaves, painting his retreating form in gold and shadow until he disappeared completely. Lila came running back, her small hand finding mine. Mama, she said breathlessly. Was that him? I nodded. Yes, love. That was your father. She smiled, unafraid. He said he'd watch us from the moonlight. I swallowed hard. He will. That night, after putting her to bed, I stood at the window, looking out over the valley. The moon hung low and full, washing the earth in pale silver. And then I heard it, a distant howl, long and haunting, threading through the stillness. Not mournful, not wild, just eternal. I closed my eyes, the sound wrapping around me like a memory of a heartbeat that never stopped. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. Some loves aren't meant to be contained by time or flesh. They become part of the world itself, woven into wind and soil, into stars and song. The next morning, Lila found a black feather on the windowsill, soft, gleaming, warm to the touch. She held it up to the sun, her eyes wide with wonder. "From Daddy?" she asked. I smiled through the ache in my chest. "Yes," I said. "From Daddy." She tucked it behind her ear, and for a heartbeat, I saw a shimmer of gold in her eyes, a spark of the wolf. Alive and at peace. When she ran out into the garden, laughing in the light, the world didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt full of echoes, of endings that were really beginnings, of a love that would never fade, only change shape. I whispered his name once more into the wind, and it carried back a sound I could almost swear was his voice. "Forever, Mira," the forest sighed. The moon shimmered faintly, even under the sun, and I knew then that no curse, no death, no destiny could erase what we had become. Two souls bound not by blood, but by the eternal echo of love itself.